The Mafia king who controlled an entire city couldn't control the one thing that mattered, his wife's heart. When Emma Carter discovered the photograph that shattered her perfect marriage, she did what no one had ever dared. She handed Lorenzo De Luca divorce papers and walked away from his empire. But 3 weeks later, the most dangerous man in the underworld appeared at her new workplace, not with threats or power plays, but with something far more terrifying: vulnerability. This is the story of a woman who reclaimed her freedom and a king who learned that love cannot be conquered, only chosen. If you want to see how their story ends, stay until the final moment. And please, hit that like button and comment your city below so I can see how far this story reaches across the world. The crystal chandelier cast fractured light across the dining table, each prism catching the flicker of 16 candles arranged in perfect symmetry. Emma Carter had counted them twice, making sure everything was exact because Lorenzo noticed details. The angle of a wingback chair, the temperature of his scotch, the loyalty of the men who worked for him. She'd learned in 3 years of marriage that precision mattered in his world, where a single miscalculation could end in blood. The filet mignon had gone cold an hour ago. The wine she'd chosen, a 1982 Chateau Margaux that cost more than most people's monthly rent, sat untouched in its decanter, breathing pointlessly into the silence of their penthouse. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sprawled beneath them like a kingdom, its lights twinkling with oblivious celebration while Emma sat alone at a table set for two, waiting for a man who had promised, just this once, to be on time. It was their 3rd anniversary. She'd worn the emerald dress he'd once told her matched her eyes, though she wondered now if he even remembered saying it. She'd dismissed the household staff, wanting this evening to be intimate, private, wanting, perhaps foolishly, to pretend they were just a normal couple celebrating another year together. But there was nothing normal about being married to Lorenzo De Luca, one of the most powerful mafia bosses on the East Coast, a man whose name alone could silence a room or empty a street. Her phone buzzed against the table, and her heart leapt with stupid hope. But it wasn't Lorenzo. It was a notification from some gossip site she didn't even follow, pushed to her phone by an algorithm that had learned she searched his name obsessively, looking for reassurance in the space between his rare appearances in their shared life. Breaking. Mafia king. Lorenzo De Luca. Spotted at Michelin star restaurant with mystery woman in red. The words blurred. Emma's hands shook as she clicked the link, even though some deeper instinct screamed at her not to look, not to know, to preserve whatever fragile illusion she'd built around their marriage. But she looked anyway, and the image loaded with cruel clarity. Lorenzo, in the charcoal suit she'd helped him choose last month, holding the door of Luminaire, the most exclusive restaurant in the city, the one with a 6-month waiting list, for a woman Emma had never wanted to see again. Sofia Marcelli, his former lover, the daughter of a rival crime family, the woman Lorenzo had been with before his father arranged his marriage to Emma as part of a territorial peace agreement. Sofia wore crimson that clung to her like a second skin, her dark hair swept over one bare shoulder, her hand resting on Lorenzo's arm with casual possession. And Lorenzo looked at her the way Emma had spent 3 years hoping he might one day look at her, engaged, present, alive. The phone slipped from Emma's fingers, clattering against the china plate that held her untouched meal. She stood abruptly, the chair scraping against Italian marble, and walked to the window. 43 stories below, normal people lived normal lives. They fought about whose turn it was to take out the garbage. They celebrated anniversaries in restaurants they'd saved for. They worried about mortgages and promotions and whether their partners still found them attractive. Emma pressed her palm against the glass, feeling the cold seep through her skin. She'd never wanted this life. She'd been a graduate student working on her art history thesis when Lorenzo's world had crashed into hers at a gallery opening. He'd been different then, or she'd been naive enough to believe he was, charming, attentive, dangerous in a way that felt thrilling rather than suffocating. He'd pursued her with the same focused intensity he applied to everything, and she'd fallen, mistaking possession for passion. The marriage had been her choice, technically. Lorenzo had been honest about what he was, about the world she'd be entering, but he'd also promised her something that, in retrospect, he'd never been capable of delivering, that she would matter more than the empire. She heard the penthouse door open at 11:47 p.m., nearly 4 hours after he'd promised to be home. Emma didn't turn from the window. She watched Lorenzo's reflection appear in the glass, his tall frame moving with that predatory grace that had once made her pulse quicken and now just made her tired. "Emma." His voice was deep, controlled, giving nothing away. "You're still awake." "It's our anniversary," she said quietly, still not turning. I waited. A pause. In the reflection she saw him loosen his tie, the gesture achingly familiar. "I know, something came up. Sophia Marcelli came up?" The words escaped before she could stop them, sharp and brittle. "At Luminaire?" The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush. Emma finally turned to face him, and for just a moment she saw something flicker across Lorenzo's face. Surprise, maybe, or calculation. His dark eyes, the ones that could turn cold as winter when he dealt with his enemies, studied her with unsettling intensity. "You saw the photo." It wasn't a question. "The whole city saw the photo, Lorenzo. It's trending." He moved to the bar, pouring himself 2 fingers of scotch with steady hands. Everything about Lorenzo was steady, controlled, impenetrable. It was what made him successful in his brutal world, and what made him impossible to reach in hers. "It was business," he said, his tone suggesting the matter was closed. "You took her to Luminaire for business? The restaurant I've asked you to take me to for 2 years? The one you said was too public, too exposed?" Emma heard her voice rising and hated herself for it, for caring, for letting him see that he could still hurt her. Lorenzo took a slow sip of his drink, and when he looked at her, his expression was maddeningly calm. "Sophia's family controls the port. We needed to discuss the shipping routes. It was neutral territory. On our anniversary. I don't track dates, Emma. I track threats, opportunities, and alliances. That's what keeps us alive. Us. As if they were a unit, a team, partners in anything beyond the legal documents that bound them." Emma laughed, a sound without humor. "There is no us, Lorenzo. There's your empire, and there's me, sitting in this beautiful cage waiting for you to remember I exist." Something shifted in his expression, a tightening around his eyes that might have been anger or might have been something else entirely. He set down his glass with deliberate care. "You knew what this life was when you married me. I knew what you told me it would be. You said I'd be your priority. You said you wanted to build something different than what your father had. You said—" Her voice cracked, and she forced herself to stop, to breathe, to remember the decision she'd made while sitting alone at that cold dinner table. "What I said 3 years ago was naive," Lorenzo said, his voice harder now. "This world doesn't allow for priorities beyond survival and power. Every moment I spend away from the business is a moment someone could be positioning against me, against us. Then let them." The words came out steady, final. "I'm done being protected by someone who treats me like another asset to manage." Emma walked to the bedroom, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She retrieved the envelope from her nightstand drawer, the one she'd picked up from her lawyer yesterday, the one that had felt both terrifying and liberating in her hands. When she returned to the living room, Lorenzo hadn't moved, but his eyes tracked her with predatory focus. She placed the envelope on the marble counter between them. "I want a divorce." For the first time in 3 years, Emma saw Lorenzo De Luca surprised. His mask slipped for just a fraction of a second, revealing something raw underneath. Shock, perhaps, or hurt, or anger. But it disappeared so quickly she might have imagined it. "Emma." Her name in his mouth sounded like a warning and a question at once. "I'm not asking for anything from you," she continued, her voice stronger now. "No money, no property, nothing. I just want my life back. I want to be free of this." She gestured at the opulent penthouse, the city sprawling below, the weight of his empire pressing down on everything. "I want to be someone again, not just Lorenzo De Luca's wife." He picked up the envelope slowly, pulled out the papers, scanned them with those dark, unreadable eyes. When he looked up at her, his face had returned to that impenetrable calm that made him so dangerous in his world, and so impossible in hers. "You think leaving me makes you free?" His voice was soft, almost gentle, which somehow made it more threatening. "You think you can just walk away from this life?" "I'm not asking for permission, Lorenzo. I'm informing you." Emma forced herself to hold his gaze, to not show the fear fluttering in her chest. She'd seen what Lorenzo did to people who defied him, the cold precision with which he eliminated threats. But some part of her, maybe the part that was already broken, didn't care anymore, Lorenzo set the papers down carefully, his movements controlled. Where will you go? That's not your concern anymore. Everything about you is my concern. The words came out hard, possessive, and Emma felt a flash of anger cut through her fear. No, Lorenzo, I'm not your concern. I'm not your wife, not really. I'm just another piece on your chessboard, and I'm removing myself from the game. She picked up her purse from the side table, her hands shaking but determined. My lawyer will be in touch about the details. Emma, wait. For the first time, she heard something in his voice that might have been pleading, though Lorenzo De Luca didn't plead. He commanded, strategized, dominated, but he didn't beg. She paused at the door, not turning back. If she looked at him, she might lose her nerve, might fall back into the pattern of hoping he'd change, that the man she'd fallen for at that gallery 3 years ago might somehow emerge from behind the armor of the Mafia king. Do you love her? The question escaped before she could stop it. Sophia? The silence stretched so long Emma thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. No. But you could. You could love her, or someone like her, because she understands your world. She speaks your language. I never did I? I was just... Emma's throat tightened. I was just the peace offering between families, the acceptable choice. That's not... Lorenzo started, but Emma was already opening the door. Sign the papers, Lorenzo. Let me go. She walked out of the penthouse, out of the private elevator, past the security guards who'd been paid to protect her but worked for him, and out into the night air that felt like the first real breath she'd taken in 3 years. The cold October wind bit through her emerald dress, but Emma welcomed it, welcomed anything that felt real after so long in the suffocating luxury of Lorenzo's world. She'd planned this. After seeing that photo, after sitting alone at that anniversary table, she'd called her lawyer, signed the papers, and arranged for a friend to pick her up. She had a bag packed with essentials at her best friend Rachel's apartment, and a plan to stay there until she could figure out what came next. Rachel's car pulled up to the curb, and Emma slid into the passenger seat, her body finally allowing itself to shake now that she was away from Lorenzo's eyes. You did it? Rachel asked, her voice tight with worry and pride. Emma nodded, not trusting herself to speak. As they pulled away from the building that had been her prison for 3 years, she didn't look back. She couldn't. Because despite everything, despite the loneliness, the neglect, the photograph that had shattered her last illusion, some traitorous part of her heart still hoped Lorenzo might come after her. But he didn't. Lorenzo De Luca, who could mobilize 100 men with a single phone call, who controlled territories across 3 states, who had never lost a battle in his ruthless climb to power, let her go without a fight. And somehow, that hurt most of all. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of paperwork, job applications, and nights spent on Rachel's couch, staring at the ceiling and wondering if she'd made a catastrophic mistake. Emma had no work experience beyond the brief period before her marriage when she'd worked as a gallery assistant. Lorenzo had insisted she didn't need to work, that his wife shouldn't have to, and she'd been too young and too in love to see how that dependence would trap her. Now, at 28, she was essentially starting over with nothing but a bachelor's degree in art history and 3 years of experience as the ornamental wife of a criminal. Every job interview ended the same way. The moment they recognized her name, saw the connection to Lorenzo De Luca, their expressions would shift from interested to uncomfortable. Nobody wanted to hire the mafia boss's wife, even if she was leaving him. You need to change your name, Rachel suggested over coffee one morning, her practical nurse's mind already problem-solving. At least use your maiden name. Carter doesn't ring any alarm bells. I can't, Emma said quietly. The divorce isn't final yet. Lorenzo hasn't signed the papers. Rachel's eyebrows shot up. It's been 3 weeks. What's he waiting for? Emma had been asking herself the same question. Her lawyer had sent the papers to Lorenzo's attorney, who'd acknowledged receipt but offered no timeline. Emma had heard nothing from Lorenzo himself. No calls, no texts, no dramatic attempts to win her back. Just silence, which felt like its own form of rejection. She'd expected anger, maybe threats, possibly some attempt to convince her to return. What she hadn't expected was to be ignored, as if she'd already ceased to exist in his carefully controlled world. Maybe he's just making sure all the legal details are perfect, Rachel offered, though her tone suggested she didn't believe it either. You know how his people are about contracts. Emma nodded absently, scanning the job listings on her laptop for the 100th time. Most required experience she didn't have or offered wages that wouldn't cover rent in any decent part of the city. She'd been spoiled by Lorenzo's wealth, she realized with shame. She'd forgotten what it was like to worry about money, to calculate the cost of every purchase, to understand the value of a dollar. Her phone buzzed with an unknown number, and Emma's heart leapt stupidly before she could stop it. But it wasn't Lorenzo. It was a text from someone named Victor Langley, asking if she was still interested in the position she'd applied for at Langley and Associates Fine Jewelry. Emma barely remembered applying. She'd sent out so many resumes in the past week that they'd all blurred together, but she remembered the listing. Assistant position at a prestigious jewelry boutique, no specific experience required, just an eye for beauty and a passion for art. It had seemed too good to be true, which was why she'd applied without much hope. She texted back immediately, trying not to sound desperate, and within an hour she had an interview scheduled for that afternoon. "This could be it," Rachel said encouragingly as Emma changed into the one professional outfit she'd brought from the penthouse, a simple black dress that Lorenzo had once said made her look like she was attending a funeral. She'd worn it anyway, a small rebellion that he'd noticed with a slight tightening of his jaw before dismissing it. Now, looking at herself in Rachel's bathroom mirror, Emma thought maybe he'd been right. The dress did look funereal, or at least severe, washing out her complexion and emphasizing the dark circles under her eyes from too many sleepless nights. But it was professional, appropriate, and more importantly, it was hers, bought with her own money before the marriage, one of the few things she owned that didn't come from Lorenzo's world. Langley and Associates occupied a corner storefront in the city's upscale shopping district, its windows displaying jewelry that managed to be both elegant and bold, not the ostentatious pieces favored by Mafia wives trying to broadcast their husbands' wealth, but artistic creations that spoke of craftsmanship and vision. Emma stood outside for a moment, gathering her courage. Through the glass, she could see a man arranging a display of what looked like handcrafted rings, each one unique. He moved with careful precision, adjusting angles and lighting until each piece caught the afternoon sun just right. The bell chimed softly as she entered, and the man looked up with a smile that reached his eyes. He was perhaps in his early 40s, with silver threading through his dark hair, and the kind of face that suggested intelligence rather than conventional handsomeness. "Emma Carter?" he asked, coming forward with an extended hand. "Victor Langley. Thank you for coming on such short notice." His handshake was firm but not aggressive, his palm rough with the calluses of someone who worked with his hands. Emma found herself relaxing slightly in the absence of calculation in his eyes. He looked at her like a person, not like Lorenzo De Luca's wife or a potential security risk or a chess piece to be positioned. "Thank you for the opportunity," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Victor gestured to a small office in the back, past display cases filled with jewelry that ranged from delicate to dramatic. As they walked, Emma couldn't help studying the pieces, the way certain stones were set to catch light, the unconventional combinations of materials, the artistic choices that elevated each piece beyond mere decoration. "You have a good eye," Victor observed, watching her pause at a display of rings that incorporated raw, unpolished stones into elegant settings. "Most people walk right past those. They're not conventionally beautiful." "They're honest," Emma said without thinking, then flushed. "I'm sorry, that probably sounds pretentious." "Not at all. Honesty in design is rare. Most jewelry is about projection, wealth, status, romance. These pieces are about texture, authenticity, the beauty in imperfection." Victor smiled. "You understand the difference. That's promising." They settled into his office, which was more of a workshop than a traditional business space. Tools hung organized on pegboards, sketches covered one wall, and a jeweler's bench dominated the corner, scattered with works in progress. "I have to be honest with you, Emma," Victor said, his tone gentle but direct. "I know who you are. Or rather, who you're married to." Emma's stomach dropped. "I'm getting divorced. The papers are filed. I'm not concerned about your marital status. I'm concerned about whether you're here because you want to be or because you're running from something. This work requires focus, dedication, and genuine passion. If you're just looking for a distraction from a difficult situation, we'll both be wasting our time." The directness was refreshing after weeks of people dancing around the obvious. Emma met his gaze steadily. "I'm here because, for the first time in 3 years, I have the chance to be someone beyond my last name." I studied art history because I loved how objects could carry meaning, could communicate emotion without words. Jewelry is wearable art, personal art. And yes, I'm running from something, from a life where I was decorative rather than creative, where my only value was in being perfectly arranged on someone's arm. But I'm also running towards something. I just need someone to give me a chance to find out what that is. Victor studied her for a long moment, and Emma held her breath, certain she'd said too much, revealed too much desperation, but then he nodded slowly. The position is yours if you want it. Part-time to start, minimum wage plus commission on any pieces you help sell. But I'll teach you the craft if you're willing to learn. How to set stones, work with different metals, understand the properties of various materials. If you have talent, real talent, not just enthusiasm, we can discuss expanding your role. Emma felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back fiercely. I won't let you down. I know you won't. You have too much to prove. Victor's smile was knowing but not unkind. When can you start? Tomorrow? Tomorrow it is. Emma practically floated out of the boutique, her first real victory in what felt like forever, warming her chest. She had a job, a real job, earned on her own merit, in a field she cared about. It wasn't much. The salary would barely cover rent on the cheapest apartment she could find, but it was hers. She was 3 blocks away, lost in plans and possibilities, when she felt the prickle of awareness that comes from being watched. Emma turned, scanning the street, and her blood went cold. A black SUV idled at the curb, its windows tinted. She recognized it immediately, one of Lorenzo's security vehicles. As if sensing her attention, the back window rolled down just enough for her to see the familiar profile of Marco, Lorenzo's head of security. Their eyes met for a brief moment before the window slid back up and the SUV pulled away into traffic. Emma's hands shook as she pulled out her phone, torn between fear and fury. Was Lorenzo having her followed? Was this his way of reminding her that she couldn't escape his reach, even if she left his house? But when she looked at her phone, there was a message from an unknown number sent just moments ago. Congratulations on the new job. Be safe. L. Emma stared at the message, emotions warring inside her. He was having her followed. He was monitoring her movements, her decisions, her new life. The man who'd let her walk away without a fight was still keeping her under surveillance like she was one of his operations. She should have been angry. She was angry, but underneath the anger was something more complicated, something that felt dangerously like relief that he still cared enough to watch, even from a distance. Emma deleted the message and kept walking, but she could feel the weight of Lorenzo's invisible presence following her through the city streets, a reminder that leaving his house was easier than leaving his world. The morning sun cut through the boutique's windows at an angle that made the jewelry displays come alive with fractured light. Emma arrived 20 minutes early for her first day, her nerves humming with a mixture of anticipation and residual fear from Lorenzo's message the night before. She'd barely slept, alternating between excitement about her new job and anxiety about the black SUV that had followed her home to Rachel's apartment, parking across the street until she'd turned off the lights. Victor was already there, arranging a new shipment of loose gemstones on black velvet trays. He looked up when the bell chimed and smiled with what seemed like genuine pleasure. Good, you're early. That tells me you're serious. He gestured to the stones spread before him. Come here. First lesson. Emma approached, setting down her purse carefully. Up close, the gemstones were mesmerizing. Deep blue sapphires, vibrant emeralds, rubies that seemed to hold fire in their depths, and dozens of stones she couldn't identify, each cut and polished to reveal their inner light. What do you see? Victor asked, watching her face rather than the stones. They're beautiful. Everyone says that. Look deeper. What makes them beautiful? Emma studied the array, trying to think past the obvious. The way they catch light. The clarity? Closer, but still surface level. Victor picked up a sapphire, holding it to the morning sun. This stone has an inclusion. See that tiny flaw near the center? Most jewelers would reject it, call it imperfect. But watch what happens when light hits it. He adjusted the angle, and suddenly the inclusion created a star effect, radiating light in 6 perfect directions. The flaw makes it unique. More valuable, actually, to someone who understands what they're seeing. He set it down and picked up what looked like a rough, unpolished stone, gray and unremarkable. And this? Most people would walk right past it. But it's a raw diamond, and inside, he turned it, and Emma gasped as light revealed flashes of brilliance hidden in the rough exterior. Inside is something extraordinary waiting to be revealed. The art isn't in finding perfect stones. It's in seeing potential where others see flaws. Emma felt the words land somewhere deeper than a simple lesson about gemstones. Victor's knowing smile suggested he'd intended the metaphor. Now, he said, setting down the diamond, let's see if you can apply that principle. I have 3 clients coming in today, each looking for something specific. Your job is to observe, listen, and learn. Don't try to sell anything. Just pay attention to why people choose what they choose. The technical skills you can learn. Understanding people, that's the real craft. The first client arrived within the hour, a nervous young man clutching a folder of printed screenshots, clearly engagement ring shopping. Emma watched as Victor guided him through options, asking questions that went beyond budget and style preferences. Tell me about her, Victor said, ignoring the screenshots entirely. Not what she looks like or what she does. Tell me who she is. The young man blinked, caught off guard. She's incredible. She's a veterinarian, works crazy hours, comes home covered in fur, and sometimes worse. But she lights up talking about the animals she helps. She doesn't care about expensive things. Last year for her birthday, I got her tickets to this fancy restaurant, and she was happy, but it wasn't her, you know. She would have been happier with takeout and a documentary about wildlife conservation. Victor nodded, already moving past the traditional engagement rings toward a case Emma hadn't noticed before. Then she doesn't want a ring that screams wealth or status. She wants something that reflects who she is, someone who values substance over surface, who finds beauty in authenticity. He pulled out a ring that made Emma's breath catch. The band was rose gold, delicately worked to resemble a vine, and the center stone wasn't a diamond at all, but a golden-green peridot, set with small diamonds arranged like dewdrops along the vine. It's perfect, the young man whispered, and Emma could see it was true. The ring was unusual, organic, beautiful without being ostentatious, exactly right for the woman he'd described. After he left, practically floating with the ring box in his pocket, Victor turned to Emma. What did you notice? You didn't try to sell him what he thought he wanted. You listened to who she was and showed him what she needed. Exactly. Jewelry isn't about the object. It's about the story it tells, the meaning it carries. That's what makes it valuable. He paused, studying her with those thoughtful eyes. It's also why I think you'll be good at this. You understand what it's like to be reduced to surface level, to be chosen for the wrong reasons. You know the difference between being valued and being valuable. Emma felt her throat tighten. How did you? I pay attention. It's the same skill I'm teaching you. Victor's expression softened. Everyone who comes through that door has a story, Emma. Your job is to honor it, not judge it, including your own. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of observations and quiet lessons. Victor showed her how to identify different metals, explained the 4 C's of diamond quality, taught her the proper way to present a piece so the client could see it at its best angle. Emma absorbed everything like she was starving for knowledge, for purpose, for something that made her feel competent rather than decorative. She was reorganizing a display of estate jewelry when the bell chimed and she looked up to see a woman in her 60s enter, moving with the careful deliberation of someone managing chronic pain. Victor was in the back room on a phone call with a supplier, so Emma approached hesitantly. Good afternoon. Can I help you find something? The woman smiled, but Emma could see grief shadowing her eyes. I'm not sure. I need to sell some pieces. My husband passed 6 months ago, and I need the money more than the memories right now. She laughed, but it came out broken. That sounds terrible, doesn't it? It sounds honest, Emma said gently, echoing Victor's words from that morning. Would you like to show me what you have? The woman opened a worn velvet box, revealing a collection that told a story of decades together. A simple gold wedding band, a charm bracelet heavy with tiny mementos, a pair of pearl earrings that had probably been a special occasion gift. Each piece was modest, not particularly valuable in terms of materials, but Emma could see they were priceless in meaning. These are beautiful, Emma said softly, examining the charm bracelet. Each charm represented something, a tiny book, a lighthouse, a pair of ice skates. Each one has a story. 43 years of stories. The woman's voice wavered. The book was from our honeymoon in Boston. The lighthouse from Cape Cod, where we went every summer. The ice skates from the winter he taught me to skate and I broke my wrist, and he felt so guilty he proposed right there in the emergency room. Emma felt tears prick her eyes, thinking of her own empty jewelry box back at the penthouse, filled with expensive pieces Lorenzo had given her on birthdays and holidays. Beautiful, flawless, and completely devoid of personal meaning. She'd never broken her wrist ice skating with Lorenzo. She'd never created memories that could be translated into tiny silver charms. Victor emerged from the back and took in the scene with a glance. He approached carefully, introducing himself, and examined the jewelry with the same attention he gave to precious gemstones. "These are valuable," he said finally, and the woman's face crumpled with relief. "Not in the way you might think. The materials themselves, the gold, the pearls, those have a certain worth, but the real value is in the craftsmanship and the story. The charm bracelet especially, it's the kind of piece that collectors seek out. Personal history jewelry, we call it." He named a figure that made the woman gasp, nearly double what she'd clearly been expecting. Emma saw her hands shake as she accepted Victor's offer, saw the way relief and grief warred on her face as she carefully removed her wedding band for the last time. After she left, Victor turned to Emma. "You did well. You honored her story instead of rushing to business. I didn't do anything. You made the sale. You made her feel seen. That's more important." He placed the jewelry carefully in a safe. "These pieces will go to our estate collection. Someone will buy the charm bracelet and start their own story with it, and that woman can pay her heating bill this winter. Everyone wins, but only because you took the time to understand what she needed." Emma felt something shift inside her, a sense of purpose clicking into place. This was what she'd been missing in Lorenzo's world, the chance to matter in small, real ways rather than existing as a symbol of his power and wealth. The afternoon brought more clients, more stories, more lessons in seeing beyond surface value. Emma was studying the estate jewelry collection, trying to memorize the difference between Victorian and Edwardian settings, when the bell chimed again and her entire world tilted. Lorenzo De Luca stood in the doorway of Langley and Associates, looking as out of place as a wolf in a jewelry shop. He wore one of his impeccable dark suits, his presence filling the small boutique with an energy that felt dangerous despite his calm expression. Every survival instinct Emma had developed in 3 years of marriage screamed at her to be careful, to calculate, to protect herself. But she was done being careful around him. "What are you doing here?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Shopping," Lorenzo said, his dark eyes fixed on her with unnerving intensity. "I'm allowed to shop, aren't I?" "Not here. Not at my workplace." Emma glanced toward the back room where Victor was working, praying he wouldn't emerge and see this confrontation. "You need to leave." Lorenzo moved further into the boutique, his gaze sweeping over the displays with the same assessing attention he probably gave to territory maps and alliance negotiations. "Nice place. Different from where you used to work. More authentic." "How would you know? You never came to the gallery." The words escaped before Emma could stop them, 3 years of resentment bleeding through. Something flickered in Lorenzo's expression. Acknowledgement, maybe, or regret. He stopped in front of a display of custom engagement rings, studying them with apparent fascination. "You're right. I didn't. I was busy building an empire while you were building a life I was too blind to see." Emma stared at him, completely thrown. Lorenzo didn't apologize. He didn't acknowledge mistakes. He moved forward, always forward, leaving the past and its casualties behind. "What do you want, Lorenzo?" He turned to face her fully, and Emma saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Uncertainty. The man who controlled a criminal empire with absolute confidence looked uncertain standing in a jewelry boutique facing his estranged wife. "To see you. To make sure you're safe." "I'm safe. You can see that. Now please leave before you cost me the only job I've been able to get." "Because of me?" His jaw tightened. "Because people are afraid to hire you? Because everyone knows who I'm married to and nobody wants to bring your world into their business. So yes, because of you." Emma crossed her arms, kneading the barrier. "Victor took a chance on me despite your reputation. Don't make him regret it." Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment, his gaze moving over her face like he was memorizing features he might never see again. "You look different. Lighter, maybe. Or just free." "I am free. Or I will be. Once you sign the divorce papers." "About that, Lorenzo started, but Victor emerged from the back room, taking in the scene with those observant eyes that missed nothing. Can I help you with something? Victor's tone was professionally polite, but Emma heard the edge underneath. He'd positioned himself slightly between Emma and Lorenzo, a subtle protection that made her throat tight. Lorenzo's attention shifted to Victor, assessing him with the cold calculation he usually reserved for rivals. Victor Langley, I've heard about your work. Impressive. And you are? Victor asked, though his tone suggested he knew exactly who Lorenzo was. A potential customer. I'm looking for something specific. Lorenzo's gaze slid back to Emma. Something that represents transformation. A piece that acknowledges the past, but looks toward the future. The metaphor was so obvious it was painful. Emma felt her cheeks heat. Victor, this is Lorenzo De Luca, my soon-to-be ex-husband. He was just leaving. Actually, I'm serious about the purchase, Lorenzo said, not moving. I have an event coming up, and I need something that makes a statement. I've been told Mr. Langley creates custom pieces. Is that true? Victor studied Lorenzo with the same careful attention he gave to gemstones, looking for flaws and potential in equal measure. I do custom work for select clients, though I generally require a consultation to understand what statement they're trying to make. The statement is simple. I want people to know that some things are valuable enough to fight for, even when you've already lost them. Lorenzo's eyes never left Emma's face. Even when you've been the one stupid enough to let them go in the first place. Emma felt her breath catch, fury and confusion warring in her chest. Don't do this. Don't come to my workplace and try to... To what? Win me back with jewelry? I lived in a penthouse full of jewelry, Lorenzo. It didn't make me less alone. I know. His voice dropped, intimate despite Victor's presence. That's why I'm here instead of sending someone else. That's why I'm asking instead of demanding. I know I don't deserve your time or your attention, but I'm asking anyway. Victor cleared his throat. Emma, why don't you take your lunch break? I can handle the consultation. It was phrased as a suggestion, but Emma heard the kindness underneath, a chance to escape, to not have to stand here while her husband commissioned jewelry that symbolized the marriage she was trying to leave. No, Emma heard herself say. I'll stay. Victor, you have the Westfield appointment in 15 minutes. I can do the initial consultation. Victor looked between them, his expression skeptical. Are you sure? Emma nodded, even though she wasn't sure at all. But running from Lorenzo felt like giving him power over her new life, and she was done letting him have that power. After Victor left with obvious reluctance, silence settled heavy between Emma and Lorenzo. She gestured stiffly to the consultation area, a small table with chairs where clients could examine pieces more closely. So, Emma said, pulling out her new notepad with hands that shook only slightly. Tell me about this event. What's the occasion? A charity gala. I'm hosting it. Lorenzo sat across from her, his large frame making the delicate chair look absurd. A foundation for children who've lost parents to violence. First annual event. Emma's pen paused. You're starting a charity? I'm trying to. Turns out running a legitimate organization is harder than running an empire. There are boards, regulations, people who ask uncomfortable questions about where the funding comes from. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. I'm learning that legal money is much more complicated than illegal money. Why? The question came out before Emma could stop it. Why would you start something like that? Lorenzo was quiet for a moment, his fingers drumming against the table in a rare display of nervous energy. Because you were right. About everything. I built an empire, but I didn't build a life. I controlled territory, but I lost the only person whose presence actually made that territory feel like home. Emma forced herself to look down at her notepad, to focus on the professional task rather than the emotions churning in her chest. That doesn't answer my question. Why a charity for children? Because I saw what happened to Marco's daughter when her mother was killed in crossfire meant for someone else, 8 years old, and she stood at that funeral with eyes that had already stopped believing the world was safe. I looked at her and realized I'd created a city full of children like that, collateral damage from the wars I wage for power I don't even enjoy. He paused, and when Emma looked up, she saw something raw in his expression. I can't undo the past, but maybe I can make sure fewer children end up at funerals, wondering why their parents aren't coming home. Emma set down her pen carefully, trying to process this version of Lorenzo. The man who'd noticed a grieving child instead of just calculating the political implications of her mother's death. That's a good reason. What does this have to do with jewelry? I want to give something to the major donors, something that represents what we're trying to build. Protection, transformation, hope. I thought about having a plaque made or some standard corporate gift, but that felt empty. Jewelry is personal. It's something people keep, something that reminds them of what they believe in. Emma found herself interested despite her determination to stay detached. What kind of piece are you thinking? Something uniform for all the donors or individual pieces? Individual, but connected. Like each person is part of something larger. Lorenzo leaned forward, and Emma caught the scent of his cologne, achingly familiar. I was thinking something with gemstones that look different alone but create a pattern when brought together. A metaphor for how individual actions create collective change. It was a good concept, thoughtful in a way that surprised Emma. She'd never seen this side of Lorenzo, the man who thought in metaphors and symbols rather than just territories and power. That could work. Victor does beautiful work with complementary stones, pieces that are complete on their own but enhance each other when paired. Emma started sketching rough ideas, falling into the creative process despite herself. How many donors are we talking about? 25 major donors, 50 smaller contributions. Emma's pen stilled. Lorenzo, that's a significant commission. That would take Victor months, and the cost? Money isn't the issue. Time might be. The gala is in 6 months. 6 months isn't enough time for 75 custom pieces. Then I'll hire additional jewelers to work under Victor's direction. I'll pay whatever it costs to make it happen right. Lorenzo's tone had shifted into the decisive certainty Emma recognized. The Mafia boss used to getting what he wanted through sheer force of will and unlimited resources. That's not how art works, Emma said, echoing Victor's earlier lesson. You can't just throw money at creativity and expect quality. Each piece needs to be thoughtfully designed, carefully crafted. Rushing the process produces something soulless. Then what do you suggest? Emma looked up, caught off guard by the genuine question in his voice. Lorenzo was asking her opinion, treating her like an expert rather than dismissing her concerns. It was such a stark contrast to their marriage, where her thoughts had been acknowledged politely and then ignored, that she didn't know how to respond. I suggest, she said carefully, that we focus on the 25 major donor pieces. Those should be custom, meaningful, worthy of the contribution and the cause. For the 50 smaller donations, we could create a single beautiful design, still custom but reproducible. It maintains quality while being achievable in your timeline. Lorenzo nodded slowly. That makes sense. Can you design them? What? No, I've been working here for 1 day. I don't have the skill or the authority to, but you have the vision. I can hear it in how you're talking about the project. You understand what I'm trying to accomplish in a way I'm not sure I could explain to someone else. Victor is the artist. I'm just the assistant. You're more than that. You've always been more than anyone gave you credit for, including me. Lorenzo's voice dropped, intimate and intense. Work with Victor on the designs. I'll compensate both of you fairly. But I want your hands on this project, Emma. Your creativity, your insight. You understand transformation in a way most people don't. Emma wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain the professional distance that would protect her from getting pulled back into Lorenzo's orbit. But she couldn't deny the thrill of excitement at the thought of actually designing something, of seeing her vision take physical form. I'll talk to Victor. If he agrees to take on the commission and wants my input, I'll help. But this is his boutique, his art. I'm not making decisions without his approval. Fair enough. Lorenzo stood, towering over the small table. I appreciate your time. And Emma? I signed the divorce papers. My lawyer should be sending them to yours by end of day. Emma's heart lurched painfully. You did? You asked me to let you go. I'm trying to respect that, even though every instinct I have is screaming at me to fight, to refuse, to use every resource I have to keep you in my life. His smile was sad, self-aware. But I'm learning that the way I've always done things, taking what I want, controlling every situation, that doesn't work with you. It never did. I just didn't want to see it. He moved toward the door, then paused. The charity gala. Whether you work on the jewelry or not, I'd like you to be there, as a guest, not my wife. Just someone who might believe that people can change if they have the right reason to try. Before Emma could respond, he was gone, the bell chiming softly in his wake. She sat frozen at the consultation table, her mind reeling. Lorenzo had signed the divorce papers. She was free. This was what she wanted, what she'd demanded. So why did it feel like loss instead of victory? Victor returned 20 minutes later, took one look at Emma's face, and poured them both coffee from the small pot he kept in the back. They sat in silence for a moment before he spoke. Want to talk about it? Emma explained the commission, the charity gala, Lorenzo's request that she work on the designs. Victor listened without interruption, his expression thoughtful. It's a good project, he said finally. Important cause. Interesting creative challenge. And if I'm being honest, it's the kind of high-profile commission that could put this boutique on the map with a whole new clientele. But only if you're comfortable with it. I won't take a job that compromises your healing, no matter how lucrative. Victor's eyes were kind but serious. Are you ready to work that closely with your husband's world? To create something that beautiful for a man who hurt you? Emma thought about it carefully, examining her feelings the way Victor had taught her to examine gemstones, looking past surface beauty to find the truth underneath. He's not my husband anymore. Or he won't be once the papers are finalized. And this isn't about him, not really. It's about the children who need protection, about creating something meaningful. She met Victor's gaze. But it's also about proving to myself that I can do this, that I have value beyond being Lorenzo De Luca's wife. If I run from this project because I'm afraid of him, or afraid of my own feelings, then I'm still letting him control my life. Victor smiled. Then we'll take the commission, but on our terms, our timeline, our creative vision. And you're not the assistant on this project, Emma. You're the co-designer. Equal credit, equal compensation. Victor, I can't. You can, and you will. I've been doing this for 20 years. I know talent when I see it, and I saw it in you the moment you walked through that door. You have an eye for meaning, for the stories people need jewelry to tell. That's rarer than technical skill, and I can teach you the rest. He extended his hand. Partners on this project? Emma shook his hand, feeling tears threaten. In one day, she'd gone from Lorenzo's decorative wife to a jewelry designer working on a major commission. It felt impossible, fragile, like a dream she might wake from at any moment. But it was real. Victor believed in her. And maybe, just maybe, she was starting to believe in herself. The rest of the week passed in a blur of sketches and research. Emma threw herself into the project with an intensity that surprised even her, staying late every evening to refine designs and learn about different setting techniques. Victor was a patient teacher, showing her how to translate conceptual ideas into wearable art, how to balance aesthetics with structural integrity. They decided on a concept of paired stones. Each major donor would receive a piece featuring two complementary gemstones that looked beautiful individually but created a specific optical effect when brought together. Sapphires and moonstones that mimicked the night sky. Emeralds and peridots that evoked growth and renewal. Rubies and garnets representing passion transforming into purpose. Emma found herself thinking about Lorenzo as she designed, wondering which piece would suit him. Probably the black diamonds and white sapphires, darkness and light in constant tension, each defining the other. She was sketching a setting for the ruby and garnet combination when her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Her stomach tightened, expecting another surveillance update from Lorenzo, but the message was different this time. The charity needs a name. I've been calling it the De Luca Foundation, but that feels wrong. It's not about me. It's about the children. Thought you might have insight. L. Emma stared at the message, surprised he was asking her opinion on something so personal to his new venture. She typed and deleted 3 responses before finally settling on, "What about the Marco's Daughter Foundation? Personal enough to have meaning, but focused on the mission." The response came quickly. "Perfect. Thank you." Then, after a pause, "How's the design work going?" Emma hesitated, then typed, "Good. Victor is an excellent teacher. He seems like a good man. I'm glad you found someone who sees your value." Emma set down her phone, unsettled by the conversation's intimacy. This wasn't how estranged spouses communicated. There should be lawyers between them, formal distance, legal language. Instead, Lorenzo was texting her about charity names and complimenting her new boss, being supportive in a way he'd never managed during their marriage. "Everything okay?" Victor asked, noticing her distraction. Lorenzo wants updates on the project. Is that normal for clients? For a commission this large, yes. For your specific situation? Victor's expression was knowing. That man isn't just checking on jewelry, Emma. He's checking on you. Well, he doesn't get to do that anymore. I'm not his responsibility. Maybe not. But you're still someone he cares about, whether you want him to or not. Victor set down the setting he'd been adjusting. Can I give you some advice that has nothing to do with jewelry? Emma nodded, bracing herself. People don't change their fundamental nature, but they can change their behavior if they have a strong enough reason. I don't know your husband well enough to say whether his transformation is real or performative, but I do know that you need to decide what you want independent of what he's doing. Don't let his journey determine yours. I want to be free. I want to build something that's mine. Then do that. Design beautiful jewelry, learn the craft, create a life you're proud of. If Lorenzo genuinely changes and becomes someone worthy of your time, you'll know. And if he doesn't, you'll have built something so solid he can't shake it. Emma carried those words home with her that night, turning them over in her mind as she let herself into Rachel's apartment. Her friend was working a night shift at the hospital, so Emma had the place to herself. She made tea, curled up on the couch, and allowed herself to really examine what she wanted. Freedom, yes. Independence, absolutely. But if she was honest, some part of her still wanted Lorenzo. Not the distant Mafia king who'd treated her like a beautiful possession, but the man she'd glimpsed in the boutique. The one who noticed grieving children and asked her opinion and signed divorce papers because she'd asked him to, even though it clearly cost him something. The question was whether that man was real or just another role Lorenzo was playing to get what he wanted. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Lorenzo. I know I don't have the right to ask this, but can we have dinner? No pressure, no expectations. Just two people who used to matter to each other, talking honestly for once. Emma stared at the message for a long time, her finger hovering over the keyboard. Every rational thought told her to refuse, to maintain the distance she'd fought so hard to create. But some deeper instinct whispered that maybe Victor was right. Maybe she needed to face Lorenzo directly to understand what was real and what was performance. She typed carefully. One dinner, somewhere public, neutral territory. And this doesn't change anything about the divorce. Understood. Tomorrow night, 7 p.m., there's a small Italian place in the theater district, Giovanni's. Quiet, unpretentious. No one from my world goes there. Emma recognized the restaurant, a family-owned place she'd mentioned wanting to try back when they were first married, before she'd learned that Lorenzo's schedule didn't accommodate her preferences. The fact that he remembered sent a complicated twist through her chest. Fine. I'll meet you there. She set down her phone and pressed her palms against her eyes, wondering if she was making a terrible mistake. But whether it was a mistake or not, it was her choice. And that, more than anything, felt like progress. Emma changed her outfit 3 times before settling on a simple navy dress that struck a balance between casual and put together. She refused to dress for Lorenzo the way she used to, in the designer clothes he preferred, the jewelry that announced his wealth. Tonight she was just Emma Carter, jewelry designer, meeting someone for dinner. The fact that the someone happened to be her soon-to-be ex-husband was irrelevant, or that's what she told herself as she applied lipstick with shaking hands. Rachel had offered to come home early from her shift, to be there for moral support or emergency extraction if needed, but Emma had declined. This was something she needed to do alone, needed to prove to herself that she could sit across from Lorenzo De Luca without losing the fragile identity she'd started building. Giovanni's was exactly as Lorenzo had described. A small family restaurant tucked between a vintage bookstore and a theater, the kind of place tourists walked past without noticing. The interior was warm with amber lighting and checkered tablecloths, photos of Italian countryside covering the walls, the air rich with garlic and fresh bread. Emma spotted Lorenzo immediately, sitting at a corner table far from the windows, and her breath caught despite her determination to remain unaffected. He'd dressed down, or what passed for dressing down in Lorenzo's world. Dark jeans, a simple black sweater, no tie, no visible weapons. He stood when he saw her, a gesture of courtesy that felt strange coming from a man who usually commanded rooms through sheer presence rather than manners. "Thank you for coming," he said as she approached, his voice careful, uncertain in a way she'd never heard before. "I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't." Emma slid into the chair across from him, accepting the menu from a waitress who smiled at them like they were just another couple enjoying a Thursday evening. Why did you choose this place? You mentioned it once, early on. You said it reminded you of a restaurant your grandmother used to take you to before she passed. I looked it up, made a note to bring you here, and then he stopped, jaw tightening. And then I never did. I kept meaning to, but there was always something more urgent. A meeting, a crisis, a threat that couldn't wait. Emma studied the menu without really seeing it, processing his words. You remembered that conversation? That was 3 years ago. I remember everything you've ever told me, Emma. I just didn't act on most of it, and that's on me. Lorenzo's eyes met hers, dark and intense. I'm trying to do better. The waitress returned and they ordered butternut squash ravioli for Emma, linguine with clams for Lorenzo, a bottle of red wine they would share. The ritual of ordering gave Emma time to collect herself, to remember why she was here. Closure, she told herself. Understanding, not reconciliation. When they were alone again, silence stretched between them, heavy with 3 years of unspoken words. Finally, Lorenzo spoke. I saw your design sketches. Victor showed them to me when I stopped by to discuss the timeline. Emma's defenses went up immediately. You're not supposed to see those yet. They're preliminary, rough concepts, not ready for client review. I wasn't there as a client. I was there as... He paused, searching for the right word. I don't know what I was there as. Someone trying to understand what your life looks like now. Victor could have refused to show me, but he didn't. He said you had real talent, that the concepts were sophisticated beyond your experience level. He's a good teacher. He's a man who sees your value, something I failed to do until it was too late. Lorenzo's fingers traced the condensation on his water glass, a nervous gesture that seemed wrong on someone usually so controlled. The designs are beautiful, Emma. The way you paired the stones, the symbolism, you captured exactly what I was trying to articulate but couldn't find words for. Despite herself, Emma felt warmth bloom in her chest at the praise. She'd worked so hard on those designs, pouring into them everything she understood about transformation and hope, and the way broken things could be remade into something stronger. Thank you, she said quietly. It's been challenging but fulfilling. I didn't realize how much I missed creating something meaningful. You were creating meaningful things the whole time we were married. I just didn't pay enough attention to notice. Lorenzo leaned back as the wine arrived, waiting until they were alone again. You organized charity events that raised millions for causes nobody else cared about. You mediated disputes between the wives of my associates, preventing conflicts that could have turned bloody. You made that penthouse feel like a home instead of just a fortress. I treated all of it like background noise. Emma took a long sip of wine, needing the fortification. This version of Lorenzo, self-aware, apologetic, willing to acknowledge failure, was more dangerous than the distant Mafia king. That Lorenzo she could hate cleanly. This one threatened to crack the walls she'd built around her heart. Why now? She asked, setting down her glass with deliberate care. Why are you suddenly seeing all this now that I've left? Because loss clarifies. Because coming home to an empty penthouse made me realize I'd been living in an empty penthouse all along. I just hadn't noticed while you were there filling the silence. He met her eyes, and Emma saw genuine pain in his expression. Because I read the letter you left on the kitchen counter, the one I found after you walked out. Emma's stomach dropped. She'd forgotten about that letter, written in a moment of raw emotion and abandoned because it felt too vulnerable, too honest. She thought she'd thrown it away. What letter? I didn't leave. It was in the trash. I was looking for... It doesn't matter what I was looking for. I found it, and I read it, and it destroyed me. Lorenzo's voice remained steady, but Emma could see the tension in his shoulders, the white of his knuckles as he gripped his wine glass. You wrote about feeling invisible, about cooking dinner for someone who was never coming home, about choosing your words carefully around me because you'd learned I valued silence over conversation, about slowly erasing yourself to fit into the space I'd allocated for a wife in my life. Lorenzo, I didn't mean for you to read that. It was just, I was processing, trying to understand my own feelings. It was the truth I needed to hear but was too arrogant to see on my own. He leaned forward, intensity radiating off him. You wrote that you'd started measuring your worth by how little space you took up, how few demands you made, how perfectly you could perform the role of Lorenzo De Luca's wife without requiring anything in return. And you were right. That's exactly what I'd trained you to do, not through cruelty, but through indifference, which might be worse. Their food arrived, interrupting the conversation. Emma stared at her ravioli, appetite gone, emotions churning too violently for her to think about eating. Across from her, Lorenzo wasn't touching his food either, his attention fixed on her face like she was a puzzle he was desperately trying to solve. "I don't know what you want me to say," Emma finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "That I forgive you? That I understand? I'm trying to move forward, Lorenzo, and conversations like this make it harder, not easier. I don't want your forgiveness. I haven't earned it, and I'm not sure I ever will." Lorenzo picked up his fork, set it down again, a rare display of agitation. "What I want is a chance. 6 months. 6 months for what? To prove that I can change, that I can be someone worthy of your time, your attention, your—" He stopped himself, jaw working. "I signed the divorce papers like you asked. They're filed, they're legal, you're free. But I'm asking you to pause the finalization. Give me 6 months to show you that the man you married, the one you met at that gallery, who listened to you explain the symbolism in Renaissance art for 3 hours and felt like he'd found something rare, that man is still in here somewhere under all the violence and control." Emma felt tears threaten and forced them back. "You can't just transform yourself because I walked away. People don't work like that." "You did. You left everything you knew, started over with nothing, built a new life in 3 weeks. If you can change that drastically, why can't I?" "Because I was becoming who I actually am. You're trying to become someone you think I want. There's a difference." "Then let me figure out who I actually am when I'm not just playing the role my father groomed me for." Lorenzo's voice carried an edge of desperation now. "I've spent my entire life being Lorenzo De Luca, mafia boss, territory controller, the man who inherited an empire at 23 and expanded it through ruthlessness and strategy. But I've never been just Lorenzo. Just a man. Maybe that man could be someone you'd choose to spend time with. And if he's not? If 6 months from now you're still the same person who chose dinner with Sofia Marcelli over anniversary dinner with me, then you finalize the divorce and I live with the consequences of losing the best thing that ever happened to me." Lorenzo's expression was raw, vulnerable in a way that scared Emma because it felt genuine. "But at least give me the chance to fail on my own merits instead of dismissing me based on who I've been." Emma forced herself to take a bite of ravioli, buying time to think. The food was delicious, rich and perfectly seasoned, exactly the kind of meal her grandmother would have appreciated. The irony wasn't lost on her. Lorenzo had finally brought her to this restaurant, but only after she'd left him. "What would 6 months even look like?" she asked, testing the idea carefully. "I'm not moving back into the penthouse. I'm not playing the role of your wife while you figure yourself out." "I wouldn't ask you to. You'd continue living your life, working with Victor, designing jewelry, building your independence. I'd just ask permission to be part of it occasionally. Dinner like this sometimes, maybe meeting for coffee when you have questions about the gala commission, letting me support your dreams from a distance instead of trying to control them up close." "That's not how this works, Lorenzo. You can't just lurk on the edges of my life, monitoring my progress." "I've been doing that anyway," he admitted, and Emma's anger flared hot. "I know, the SUV following me, the texts updating me on my own activities. That needs to stop. The SUV is for your safety, not surveillance. There are people in my world who might see you as leverage now that we're separated. I need to know you're protected. Then hire a security company and send me the contact information. Let me manage my own protection, but stop having your men watch me like I'm still your property." Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment, clearly warring with instincts that told him to maintain control over anything he valued. Finally, he nodded. "Okay, I'll have Marco arrange for an independent security team, no direct connection to my organization. They'll keep a discreet distance unless there's a credible threat. Is that acceptable?" It was more than Emma had expected him to concede. The fact that he'd agreed at all suggested maybe his claims about changing weren't entirely performative. "What about Sofia?" The question came out before Emma could stop it, 3 years of insecurity and comparison bleeding through her careful composure. "What about her? Are you still seeing her? Is she part of this transformation, or was that dinner actually about business?" Lorenzo's expression hardened, not with anger, but with something like regret. It was business. Sofia's family controls shipping routes. I need to transition some of my operations toward legitimate imports. But I should have told you I was meeting her. I should have invited you to join us, made it clear that she was a business associate and nothing more. Instead, I hid it, and you found out through gossip sites, like I was ashamed of you instead of the situation. Were you ever in love with her? I thought I was, a long time ago, before I understood what love actually meant. Lorenzo's gaze held Emma's, unwavering. What I felt for Sophia was attraction, convenience, the comfort of someone who understood my world without needing explanation. What I feel for you is terrifying and consuming and completely different. With you, I'm not comfortable. You challenge me, confuse me, make me want to be better than I am. That's not easy, but it's real. Emma's heart hammered against her ribs, years of hoping to hear something like this warring with the knowledge that words were easy and actions were what mattered. I need to think about this, she said finally, pushing her half-eaten ravioli around the plate. The 6 months, the security arrangement, all of it. I can't make this decision right now. Take whatever time you need. I'm not going anywhere. Lorenzo finally took a bite of his own food, and they ate in silence for a few minutes, the weight of the conversation settling around them. Eventually, Emma asked about the charity foundation, and Lorenzo's face transformed as he talked about the plans. Programs for grief counseling, college scholarships for children who'd lost parents to violence, job training for teenagers trying to avoid the path he'd taken. His passion was evident, and Emma found herself drawn into the conversation despite her reservations, offering suggestions about community partnerships and outreach strategies. You should be on the board, Lorenzo said suddenly. You have insights I'd never think of, and you care about this the right way, not as penance or image management, but because it actually matters. I'm not qualified to be on a nonprofit board. You're more qualified than half the people I've recruited. They bring money and connections. You bring heart and understanding. That's more valuable. Emma shook her head but filed the idea away to consider later. The evening continued, conversation flowing easier as they moved away from their relationship and into safer territory. Books they'd both read, movies Emma had seen while Lorenzo was working, the changes in the city since they'd stopped exploring it together. By the time they finished dinner, Emma realized with surprise that she'd almost enjoyed herself. This Lorenzo, thoughtful, present, genuinely interested in her opinions, was the man she'd fallen for 3 years ago. The question was whether he was real or just a performance designed to win her back. Outside the restaurant, the October night had turned cold, wind cutting through Emma's thin jacket. Before she could react, Lorenzo shrugged out of his sweater and draped it over her shoulders, leaving himself in just a t-shirt that showed off the lean muscle underneath. You'll freeze, Emma protested, even as she pulled the sweater closer, surrounded by the scent of him. I'll survive. I've survived worse. Lorenzo gestured to where a car waited at the curb, not one of his usual black SUVs, but a simple sedan. Let me drive you home. No pressure, no ulterior motives. Just making sure you get back safely. Emma hesitated, then nodded. The drive to Rachel's apartment was quiet. Lorenzo navigating the city streets with the same focused intensity he applied to everything. When they pulled up to the building, he made no move to get out, respecting the boundary Emma had drawn. Thank you for tonight, he said quietly. For giving me a chance to explain, even if you ultimately decide I don't deserve another opportunity. Emma unbuckled her seatbelt but didn't immediately reach for the door handle. I saw what you did. For Victor's boutique. Lorenzo's expression remained carefully neutral. I don't know what you mean. The commission is worth far more than you implied. Victor showed me the contract your lawyer sent over. You're paying triple the normal rate for custom work, plus covering all materials costs up front, plus a completion bonus that's essentially funding the boutique's expansion into custom design. Emma turned to face him fully. You're not just buying jewelry, Lorenzo. You're investing in my future without asking for anything in return. Your success isn't dependent on me. It never should have been. This is just making sure you have the resources to achieve what you're capable of. He met her eyes, and Emma saw no manipulation there, just honest acknowledgement. And maybe it's also my way of apologizing for all the years I didn't support your dreams because I was too focused on my own empire. Emma felt something crack in her chest, emotion she'd tried to keep locked away, threatening to flood through. I don't know what to do with this version of you. You don't have to do anything. Just keep building your life, creating beautiful things, becoming whoever you want to be. If that eventually includes space for me, I'll be grateful. If it doesn't, I'll learn to live with it. Emma reached for the door handle, needing to escape before she said or did something she'd regret. But she paused, Lorenzo's sweater still wrapped around her shoulders. Keep it, he said before she could offer to return it. It looks better on you anyway. She climbed out of the car, nearly reaching the building entrance before she heard his voice again. Emma? She turned back, and Lorenzo had rolled down the window, his expression vulnerable in the streetlight. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. For leaving, for starting over, for having the courage to demand better than what I was giving you. You deserved better then, and you deserve better now. I'm just hoping to become someone who qualifies. Emma nodded, not trusting her voice, and hurried into the building before the tears could fall. She made it to Rachel's apartment, closed the door behind her, and sank onto the couch, still wearing Lorenzo's sweater, her emotions a tangled mess of hope and fear and anger and something that felt dangerously like longing. Rachel found her there an hour later, red-eyed and confused, and listened without judgment as Emma poured out the entire evening. So what are you going to do? Rachel asked when Emma finally fell silent. I don't know. Part of me thinks this is exactly what I wanted. Lorenzo finally seeing me, finally changing, finally being the partner I needed him to be. But another part thinks it's too convenient, too perfectly timed. People don't transform that quickly. Sometimes they do, if the motivation is strong enough. You left him. That's a pretty significant motivation. Rachel squeezed Emma's hand. But Victor was right. Lorenzo's journey doesn't have to determine yours. You can give him 6 months and still focus on building your own life. They're not mutually exclusive. Aren't they? If I'm thinking about him, wondering if he's changing, hoping we might find our way back to each other, doesn't that compromise the independence I'm trying to build? Only if you let it. But Emma, you're not the same woman who left that penthouse a month ago. You have a job you love, a talent you're developing, a future you're creating. Lorenzo can't take that away unless you give him the power to. Emma pulled Lorenzo's sweater tighter around herself, breathing in the familiar scent and hating that it still felt like home. I'm scared. What if I give him 6 months and he breaks my heart all over again? Then you'll survive it, just like you survived leaving him the first time. You're stronger than you think. Rachel stood, heading toward the kitchen. But for tonight, stop analyzing and overthinking. Sometimes you just have to feel what you feel without trying to logic your way out of it. Emma nodded, letting herself sink into the complicated tangle of emotions without trying to organize them into neat categories. She missed Lorenzo. She was angry at him. She was proud of herself for leaving. She was terrified of hoping he could change. She wanted him back. She wanted to stay free. All of it was true, all at the same time, and maybe that was okay. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lorenzo. Home safe? Emma stared at the message, then typed back, Yes. Thank you for dinner. Thank you for coming. Sleep well, Emma. She set down the phone and closed her eyes, Lorenzo's sweater warm against her skin, and for the first time in weeks, she let herself imagine a future that included him, not as the distant Mafia boss she'd married, but as the man she'd glimpsed tonight. The man who remembered her grandmother's restaurant, who invested in her dreams, who looked at her like she was valuable, not because she belonged to him, but because she existed independently of him. It was a dangerous thing to hope for. But maybe, Emma thought, as sleep finally claimed her, some risks were worth taking. The next morning, Emma woke with new clarity. She texted Lorenzo before she could second-guess herself. 6 months, but with conditions. His response came quickly. Anything. 1. No more surveillance. Independent security only, and I get their direct contact information. Agreed. 2. We maintain separate lives. I'm not your wife, not your girlfriend, not your anything. Just 2 people who used to be married, seeing if friendship is possible. Understood. 3. If at any point I need space, you respect that immediately. No pushing, no grand gestures, no using your resources to force proximity. There was a longer pause before his response. That's the hardest one, but yes, I agree to all your terms. Then let's see what 6 months brings. Emma sent the message and immediately felt equal parts terror and relief. She'd committed to giving Lorenzo a chance, but on her terms, within her boundaries. Now she just had to trust herself enough to maintain those boundaries when her heart started whispering that maybe, just maybe, he deserved another chance. She arrived at the boutique to find Victor already setting up for the day, arranging a new shipment of pearls that gleamed in the morning light. "You look different," he observed. "Did something happen?" Emma told him about the dinner, the conversation, the 6-month agreement. Victor listened carefully, his expression thoughtful. "Are you sure about this?" "No. But I think I need to find out what's real and what's performance. And I can't do that by avoiding him entirely." "Fair enough. Just remember, you owe him nothing. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, not another chance. Whatever you decide to give him is a gift, not an obligation." "I'll remember." Emma moved to the design table where her sketches were laid out. "Now, can we talk about the settings for the sapphire and moonstone pieces? I've been thinking about how to create the optical effect without compromising structural integrity." Victor smiled, accepting the subject change, and they dove into the technical challenges of translating Emma's artistic vision into wearable jewelry. The work absorbed her completely, the familiar creative flow offering refuge from the emotional complexity of her personal life. By midday, they'd solved the structural issues, and Emma had created detailed technical drawings for the first 5 major donor pieces. She was so focused on adjusting the proportions on a ruby and garnet ring that she didn't notice the boutique door opening until Victor's voice cut through her concentration. "We're closed for lunch," he said, his tone carrying an edge Emma had never heard before. She looked up to find a woman standing in the doorway, elegant and dangerous in equal measure. Sophia Marcelli, dressed in cream silk that probably cost more than Emma's monthly salary, studied the boutique with the kind of assessing gaze Emma recognized from watching Lorenzo evaluate territory. "I'm not here to shop," Sophia said, her accent carrying traces of Italian aristocracy. "I'm here to talk to Emma." Emma's stomach tightened, but she stood, meeting Sophia's eyes with more confidence than she felt. "Then talk. Alone, preferably." Victor looked at Emma, clearly ready to refuse on her behalf, but Emma shook her head slightly. Whatever Sophia wanted to say, Emma would rather hear it now than wonder about it later. "It's fine, Victor. We can use the consultation area." They settled at the same table where Emma had taken Lorenzo's commission, an irony not lost on her as she faced the woman who'd occupied space in her marriage long before Emma had left it. "You're probably wondering why I'm here," Sophia began, crossing her legs with practiced elegance. "I'm wondering a lot of things. Why you're here is pretty low on the list compared to why Lorenzo took you to Luminaire on our anniversary." Sophia's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose slightly. "He told you it was business." "He told me a lot of things. I'm trying to figure out which ones were true." "That one was, actually. My family controls shipping routes Lorenzo needs for his transition, let's call it. Moving away from certain illegal operations toward legitimate imports requires cooperation from families like mine." Sophia studied her manicured nails. "But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't hoping the evening might lead somewhere else." Emma's chest tightened, but she kept her expression neutral. "And did it?" "No. Lorenzo spent the entire dinner talking about you. How you'd asked for a divorce, how he'd failed you, how he was trying to figure out how to become someone worthy of a second chance." Sophia's smile was sharp. "It was quite tedious, actually. I suggested he let you go. Find someone more suited to his world. He looked at me like I'd suggested he cut off his own arm." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want you to understand something. I've known Lorenzo since we were teenagers. I've seen him build his empire, watched him become one of the most powerful men on the East Coast, observed him navigate situations that would destroy lesser men, and in all that time, I've never seen him vulnerable. Not once." Sophia leaned forward, her dark eyes intense. "Until he talks about you. You terrify him, Emma. You're the one thing in his life he can't control, can't strategize his way around, can't overcome through sheer force of will. And it's destroying him." Emma didn't know what to say, so she stayed silent, waiting. "I came here to see if you were worth it. Worth Lorenzo dismantling pieces of his empire. Worth him starting charities and learning to apologize. Worth him becoming someone I barely recognize." Sophia's expression was unreadable. "I think you might be. You're not what I expected, not some fragile thing that needs protecting. You walked away from one of the most powerful men in the city, started over with nothing, built something of your own. That takes strength Lorenzo respects, even if it took him too long to show it. I don't need your approval. No, you don't. But you should know that if you hurt him, if you're playing games, leading him on while you decide whether he's worth your time, there are people in his world who won't appreciate it. People like me, who've invested years in alliances and relationships that your presence threatens. Emma felt anger flash hot through her chest. Are you threatening me? I'm informing you. There's a difference. Sophia stood, smoothing her silk dress. Lorenzo has enemies, Emma. Real ones, dangerous ones, who see his distraction over you as weakness to exploit. If you're going to be part of his life in any capacity, you need to understand that you're not just dealing with a man trying to win back his wife. You're dealing with complicated political dynamics in a world where love is often viewed as liability. Then maybe Lorenzo should let me go. Maybe we're both better off separated. Maybe. But he won't let you go, not really. And I suspect you don't actually want him to, or you wouldn't have agreed to 6 months. Sophia's smile was knowing, calculating. I have sources everywhere, Emma. I know about your arrangement, your conditions, your late-night conversations. I know Victor is paying you more than market rate for an assistant because Lorenzo is subsidizing your salary through the commission. I know. Get out. Emma stood, fury overriding fear. You don't get to come into my workplace and I'm leaving, but remember what I said. This world isn't kind to people who let their hearts make them vulnerable. Lorenzo is learning that lesson. Make sure you do too. Sophia left as elegantly as she'd arrived, the bell chiming cheerfully in her wake. Emma stood frozen at the consultation table, hands shaking with anger and something deeper, fear that Sophia was right, that Emma was stepping back into a world that would consume her if she wasn't careful. Victor appeared with 2 cups of tea, setting one in front of Emma without comment. They sat in silence for a long moment before Emma spoke. Did you know that Lorenzo is subsidizing my salary? Yes. He asked me not to tell you, said you needed to believe you were earning it on your own merit. Victor's expression was apologetic. For what it's worth, I agreed because you are earning it. The commission is paying for your salary, yes, but your work quality justifies every dollar. Lorenzo is just making sure the boutique can afford to pay you what you're worth while you're learning. I don't know whether to be grateful or furious. You can be both. Most complex situations deserve complex emotions. Victor sipped his tea. What did Sophia want? Emma explained the conversation, including the veiled threats and warnings. Victor listened with growing concern. She's right about one thing. Lorenzo's world is dangerous, and his feelings for you make him vulnerable in ways his enemies will try to exploit. But that's not your responsibility to manage. He chose his life long before he met you. I know, but I'm choosing to give him 6 months, which means I'm choosing to be part of that danger, at least peripherally. Then we need to be smart about it. No more late nights at the boutique alone. I'll drive you home when we work past dark. And if you notice anything unusual, anyone following you, strangers asking questions, you tell me immediately. Emma nodded, grateful for Victor's steady presence. The rest of the afternoon passed in tense focus, both of them working harder than necessary to avoid discussing the implications of Sophia's visit. By evening, Emma had completed technical drawings for 10 of the 25 major donor pieces. Her creative energy channeled into something productive rather than spiraling into anxiety about Sophia's warnings. She was packing up her sketches when her phone buzzed with a call from Lorenzo. She almost didn't answer, still processing Sophia's visit and her own complicated feelings. But curiosity won out. Hello? Emma, are you at the boutique? His voice was tight, controlled in a way that signaled barely restrained emotion. Yes, why? Sophia visited you today. I need to know what she said. Emma's anger flared fresh. Are you having her followed too, or does she just report back to you voluntarily? Neither. Marco saw her car parked outside Langley and Associates and informed me. I'm asking what she wanted because I need to know if she threatened you. She didn't threaten me. She just made sure I understood how complicated your world is, how dangerous it is to be connected to you, how many people have investments in your alliances. Emma moved toward the boutique's back room, away from Victor's careful discretion. She also told me you're subsidizing my salary. Were you planning to mention that? Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment. No, because it's not relevant. You're earning that salary through your work. I'm just making sure Victor can afford to pay you while you build your skills. It's relevant because it means I'm not actually independent. I'm still financially dependent on you, just indirectly now. That's not... Emma, the commission is legitimate. I need those jewelry pieces for the gala. Victor is charging fair market rate for custom work. Where he chooses to allocate those funds is between him and his accountant. Don't play semantic games with me, Lorenzo. You structured the commission specifically to fund my position. That's manipulation, even if it's well-intentioned. You're right. The admission came quickly, catching Emma off guard. I should have been transparent about the arrangement, but I knew you wouldn't take the job if you thought you were being given charity, and I wanted you to have the opportunity to prove yourself on merit, which you have. Your designs are exceptional, Emma. That's not me being biased. That's objective assessment from someone who's seen thousands of custom jewelry pieces. Emma sank onto a stool, exhaustion washing over her. I don't know how to do this. How to accept your help without feeling like I'm betraying my own independence. Then don't accept my help. Tell Victor you need to be paid from the boutique's normal operating budget, not the commission funds. Take a pay cut if necessary. Prove you can make it on your own without any connection to me. I'll support whatever decision you make. You're not supposed to be this reasonable. It makes it harder to stay angry at you. She heard something that might have been a laugh, rough and lacking humor. Believe me, I'd prefer to be unreasonable. To demand you come back, to use every resource I have to prove I've changed, to overwhelm you with grand gestures until you have no choice but to notice. But I'm learning that's not what you need. You need space to grow without my shadow over you. Then why did you structure the commission that way? Why not just let me find my own path? Because I'm not that noble yet. I'm trying to change, but I'm still the man who needs to protect what he values, even if the protection isn't wanted. I'll work on it. Emma closed her eyes, hating that she could hear genuine effort in his voice, genuine acknowledgement of his flaws. It would be easier if Lorenzo stayed the distant, controlling mafia boss. This version, flawed but trying, powerful but uncertain, was much harder to resist. Sophia said you have enemies who see your feelings for me as weakness. Sophia talks too much. But yes, that's true. It's always been true. The difference is, I used to see those feelings as weakness too. Now I'm starting to think maybe they're the only real strength I've ever had. That's a pretty sentiment, Lorenzo. But pretty sentiments don't stop bullets. No, they don't. Which is why I'm asking you to let the security team I arranged stay close. Not surveillance, just protection. There are people who would hurt you to hurt me, and I can't... His voice cracked slightly, barely perceptible. I can't let anything happen to you, Emma. That's non-negotiable. Emma understood the subtext. This was the line Lorenzo wouldn't cross, the one condition he'd break if she pushed. And maybe that was okay. Maybe accepting protection wasn't the same as accepting control. Fine, but they stay invisible. I don't want to feel watched. Agreed. Thank you. They hung up shortly after, Emma's emotions more tangled than ever. She gathered her things and found Victor waiting by the door, keys in hand. Ready to go home? More than ready. Today was exhausting. The drive to Rachel's apartment was quiet, Emma too drained for conversation. But as Victor pulled up to the building, he offered one final piece of wisdom. Relationships are complicated, Emma, even more so when one person is trying to fundamentally change who they've been. Just remember, you're allowed to protect yourself, to take things slowly, to change your mind entirely if you need to. Lorenzo might be trying to transform himself, but you don't owe him success. You only owe yourself honesty about what you want and what you're willing to risk to get it. Emma thanked him and headed inside, those words echoing through her mind. What did she want? Not the penthouse, not the wealth, not the status of being Lorenzo De Luca's wife. But maybe she wanted the man himself, the one who noticed grieving children and remembered her grandmother's restaurant and was learning, however imperfectly, to value her independence as much as her presence. The question was whether that man was real, or just another role Lorenzo was playing because he'd finally encountered something he couldn't possess through power alone. 6 months would tell her the answer. Emma just hoped she was strong enough to survive the process of finding out. The 6 months passed in a rhythm Emma hadn't expected. Steady, challenging, occasionally devastating, but always moving forward. Winter settled over the city in layers of gray and white, and Emma found herself building a life that felt increasingly solid beneath her feet. The jewelry commission consumed most of her working hours. Emma and Victor had fallen into an easy partnership, her artistic vision complementing his technical mastery. By February, they'd completed 15 of the 25 major donor pieces, each one a small masterpiece that told a story of transformation. Emma's favorite was a pair of black diamonds set with white sapphires in a design that made them look like stars emerging from darkness, a metaphor that felt painfully personal every time she worked on it. Lorenzo kept his word about distance, mostly. He texted occasionally with updates about the foundation or questions about the gala planning, but he never pushed for more than Emma offered. Twice he'd asked to meet for coffee, casual requests she'd accepted because refusing felt petty. Those meetings had been surprisingly easy, conversation flowing between them like they were old friends catching up rather than estranged spouses navigating impossible feelings. But Emma noticed things, small things that suggested Lorenzo's transformation might be real. Marco mentioned in passing that Lorenzo had reduced his active involvement in the more violent aspects of his empire, delegating to lieutenants while he focused on legitimate business ventures. Rachel reported seeing news articles about the Foundation's work, profiles of Lorenzo that painted him as a philanthropist rather than a criminal. And Victor quietly noted that other clients had started requesting Emma's design specifically, word spreading through wealthy circles that Lorenzo De Luca's jewelry designer was someone worth commissioning. "You're building a reputation," Victor said one afternoon in March, showing Emma an email from a tech CEO's wife requesting custom pieces for her anniversary. "Independent of Lorenzo, independent of me. This is your talent being recognized." Emma stared at the email, something warm and proud blooming in her chest. The client had found her through a photo of one of the foundation pieces that had leaked online, called her aesthetic, emotionally intelligent design. It was the kind of validation Emma had spent 3 years craving and 3 months building toward. "I want to accept it," she said, "but I don't know if I have time with the gala commission." "Then we hire help, an assistant for you, the way you're an assistant for me, someone to handle the technical execution while you focus on design." Victor's smile was knowing. "You're ready for this, Emma. Stop waiting for permission to succeed." They hired a recent jewelry school graduate named Maya, a quiet young woman with exceptional stone-setting skills and an eagerness to learn that reminded Emma of herself months earlier. Training. Maya gave Emma confidence she hadn't known she possessed, the ability to teach, proving she'd actually absorbed everything Victor had shared. By April, Emma had completed 3 independent commissions in addition to the foundation work. Her designs featured in a local arts magazine alongside an interview where she talked about using jewelry to tell stories of resilience and change. She'd carefully avoided mentioning Lorenzo beyond acknowledging he was a client, protecting her professional identity from his shadow. The magazine had barely hit newsstands when her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. Emma almost ignored it, but something made her answer. "Emma Carter?" A woman's voice, professional and warm. "My name is Isabel Chen. I'm the creative director for the International Jewelry Arts Collective. We host an annual exhibition in Paris featuring emerging designers from around the world. I'd like to invite you to participate." Emma's heart stopped. The IJAC exhibition was legendary in jewelry circles, the kind of opportunity that could launch entire careers. Designers who showed there went on to work with major fashion houses, create pieces for celebrities, build international reputations. "I'm flattered, but I've only been designing professionally for a few months. Surely there are more established artists who—" "We're not interested in established. We're interested in vision, emotional resonance, and technical skill that serves the artistic concept rather than showing off. Your foundation pieces demonstrate all of that." Isabel's tone was matter-of-fact, brooking no argument. "The exhibition is in September. We'd need 3 to 5 original pieces that represent your aesthetic philosophy. Are you interested?" "Yes." The word came out before Emma could overthink it. "Yes, absolutely." They discussed logistics, travel arrangements, shipping procedures, the selection committee's expectations. When Emma hung up 20 minutes later, she was shaking with adrenaline and terror in equal measure. Paris. An international exhibition. Recognition as a legitimate artist, not just Lorenzo De Luca's wife who dabbled in jewelry design. She called Victor immediately, barely coherent as she explained the opportunity. His response was characteristically calm and encouraging, practical advice mixed with genuine pride in her achievement. "This is what you've been working toward. You'll need to create pieces specifically for the exhibition, something that showcases your range while maintaining a cohesive vision. Start sketching concepts, and we'll review them together." Emma spent the rest of the day in a creative frenzy, filling pages with rough designs that explored themes of captivity and freedom, control and choice, the way beautiful things could be both treasures and cages. By evening, she'd narrowed her focus to a collection she mentally titled Unbound, 5 pieces that told the story of a woman transforming from ornament to artist, from possessed to self-possessed. She was so absorbed in her sketches that she didn't notice someone entering the boutique until Lorenzo's voice cut through her concentration. Victor said I'd find you here. He stood near the door, not approaching, giving her space even as his presence filled the room. Congratulations on the Paris exhibition. That's incredible, Emma. Emma set down her pencil, studying him. How did you hear about that? I just got the call 3 hours ago. Isabel Chen emailed me asking for a reference. She wanted to confirm your work quality and professional conduct before extending the invitation. Lorenzo's expression was carefully neutral. I told her you were the most talented designer I'd worked with, that your artistic vision was matched only by your dedication to craft. I may have also mentioned that hiring you would be the best decision her organization ever made. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. You earned this opportunity, Emma. The least I could do was make sure nobody questioned whether you deserved it. Emma felt tears threaten and blinked them back. 4 months ago, Lorenzo barely noticed her creative work. Now he was advocating for her talent to international arts organizations. The change was so profound it almost didn't feel real. Thank you, she said quietly. That means more than you know. Lorenzo moved closer, still maintaining respectful distance, and Emma saw he looked tired, not physically exhausted, but worn in some deeper way, like carrying weight that couldn't be set down. Are you okay? The question escaped before she could stop it. 3 years of trained concern for his well-being surfacing despite everything. Honestly? No. But I'm learning that being okay isn't always the goal. Sometimes the goal is just being better than you were yesterday. He gestured to her sketches. Can I see what you're working on? Emma hesitated, then turned her sketchbook toward him. The designs were raw, vulnerable, exposing more of her emotional journey than she'd intended to share. But something about the exhaustion in Lorenzo's eyes made her want to be honest. He studied the sketches in silence, his expression unreadable. When he finally looked up, Emma saw understanding in his dark eyes. These are about us, about what you went through. They're about transformation, about choosing yourself when everything tells you to disappear. Emma met his gaze steadily. But yes, our marriage, leaving it, surviving it, learning who I am without it, that's the foundation. They're devastating and beautiful. The kind of beautiful that makes people uncomfortable because it's too honest. Lorenzo touched the edge of her sketchbook carefully, like it might burn him. You're going to be extraordinary, Emma. You already are. I just wish I'd seen it sooner. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words and feelings too complicated to name. Emma wanted to ask if he was really changing or just performing change convincingly enough to fool them both. She wanted to ask if he missed her the way she sometimes, in quiet moments, missed him. She wanted to ask what happened when their 6 months ended in 2 months, whether they'd finalize the divorce or find some new arrangement neither of them could define yet. But before she could ask anything, the boutique door burst open and Marco appeared, his usually composed expression tight with urgency. Lorenzo, we have a situation. Sophia's family is moving against our shipping agreements. They're claiming breach of contract and threatening to close the routes entirely. Lorenzo's entire demeanor shifted, the tired man disappearing behind the Mafia boss who controlled empires through ruthless strategy. When? They're calling a meeting for tomorrow night. Neutral territory, but everyone knows neutral territory isn't actually neutral when the Marcelli family controls the venue. Then we control the attendees, pull in the Horvath family, the Chen syndicate, anyone with interest in keeping those routes operational. If Sophia wants to play power games, we'll remind her that she's not the only player. Lorenzo's voice had gone cold, calculating, and Emma felt a chill run through her. This was the man she'd left, the one who navigated violence and betrayal like chess moves, who saw every relationship as leverage, who built power on foundations of fear. For a moment, she'd forgotten that version of Lorenzo existed underneath the transformed exterior. Marco glanced at Emma, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation happening in front of her, but Lorenzo waved off his concern. Emma knows what I am, what I'm trying not to be anymore, but still am when threatened. He turned back to Emma, and she saw both versions of him warring in his expression, the man trying to change, and the boss who'd never learned how to back down. I have to handle this. It's not optional. I know. Emma's voice came out steadier than she felt. That's the problem, isn't it? You can't just walk away from your empire like I walked away from our marriage. It's built into everything you are. I'm trying to dismantle it, piece by piece, operation by operation, but it takes time, and sometimes pieces fight back. Lorenzo looked at Marco. "Give me 5 minutes, then bring the car around." Marco left, and silence settled heavy between Emma and Lorenzo. Outside the boutique windows, the city continued its evening rhythm. Normal people heading home to normal lives, unaware of the criminal negotiations happening in the spaces between their simple existence. "This is why we can't work," Emma said quietly. "Because your world doesn't allow for transformation. It allows for strategy, for adaptation, for finding new ways to maintain control. But actual change? Actual escape? That's not possible when your entire life is built on power dynamics." "You're wrong." Lorenzo's voice was fierce, urgent. "I've changed more in 4 months than I did in the previous 30 years. I've started a foundation, stepped back from violent operations, learned to apologize and mean it. That's not strategy, Emma. That's genuine transformation. And yet you're about to walk into a meeting where you'll threaten and manipulate and use every ruthless skill you've ever developed to win. Because that's who you are when pushed. That's who you'll always be." "What do you want me to do? Let Sophia destroy the legitimate business I'm trying to build? Let her prove to everyone in my world that my feelings for you make me weak enough to exploit?" Lorenzo moved closer, intensity radiating off him. "I'm trying to change the foundation while the building is still standing, Emma. That means sometimes I have to be both versions of myself at once, the man I'm becoming and the man I've been. It's messy and imperfect and sometimes contradictory, but it's real." Emma felt tears spill over despite her determination to stay composed. "I don't know if I can watch you navigate that. I don't know if I'm strong enough to separate the man trying to change from the Mafia boss who'll always choose power when threatened." "Then don't watch. Go to Paris, create your art, build your career, forget about me and the impossible thing I'm attempting." Lorenzo's voice cracked slightly, the only sign of emotion breaking through his controlled exterior. "But don't tell me it's not real. Don't dismiss what I've done, what I'm trying to do, because I'm not doing it perfectly, or fast enough, or cleanly enough for your standards." Marco appeared in the doorway, and Lorenzo turned away from Emma without another word. She watched him leave, his shoulders straight and his stride confident, every inch the powerful man who'd terrorized this city for years. But she'd also seen the exhaustion in his eyes, the genuine pain when she'd questioned his transformation. Victor emerged from the back room where he'd clearly been giving them privacy, his expression sympathetic. "That was rough. He's going into some kind of mafia negotiation, probably threatening people, maybe worse. How am I supposed to believe he's changed when he's still doing exactly what he's always done?" Emma sank onto a stool, emotionally wrung out. "He's doing what he's always done in service of what he's trying to become. There's a difference." Victor handed her tissue, waited while she composed herself. "Change isn't linear, Emma. It's not a straight path from who you were to who you want to be. It's messy, full of backsliding and contradictions, and moments where the old version surfaces because it's what you know how to do when scared. Are you defending him?" "I'm defending the concept of imperfect transformation. You changed too, remember? You didn't go from Lorenzo's wife to independent jewelry designer overnight. You had moments where you wanted to call him, where you missed the security of the penthouse, where you questioned whether you'd made a terrible mistake. That doesn't mean your journey wasn't real." Emma knew he was right, but it didn't make watching Lorenzo walk into his old world any easier. She gathered her sketches, said goodnight to Victor, and headed home to Rachel's apartment, her mind churning with confusion and doubt. She was unlocking the apartment door when her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Your husband is playing a dangerous game. If you care about him, convince him to back down. Otherwise, consequences will be severe." A concerned party. Emma's blood went cold. Someone was threatening Lorenzo through her, exactly the kind of leverage Sophia had warned about months ago. She forwarded the message to Lorenzo immediately, adding, "Is this what you meant about people using me to hurt you?" His response came quickly. "Don't engage. I'm handling it. You're safe. I promise." But Emma didn't feel safe. She felt exposed, vulnerable, tangled in a world she'd tried to leave but couldn't fully escape as long as Lorenzo was part of her life. And he was part of her life, whether they were married or not, whether she wanted him to be or not. 6 months of careful distance hadn't changed the fundamental truth. They were connected, for better or worse. The next few days passed in tense uncertainty. Emma threw herself into work, finalizing the last of the foundation pieces and beginning sketches for her Paris collection. But her attention kept fragmenting, part of her mind always wondering what was happening in Lorenzo's world. Whether he was safe, whether the negotiations had turned violent. She got her answer 3 days later when Lorenzo appeared at the boutique just as Emma was closing up for the evening. He looked different. There was a bruise darkening his jaw, a cut above his eyebrow that had been recently cleaned, and exhaustion carved so deeply into his features that Emma felt physical pain seeing it. What happened? She moved toward him instinctively, professional distance forgotten in the face of his obvious injury. The meeting didn't go as planned. Sophia's family was more aggressive than expected. But we reached an arrangement. Lorenzo touched his jaw gingerly. The shipping routes stay operational. I maintain my transitions toward legitimate business, and I agreed to support Sophia's family in an unrelated territory dispute. You're hurt. I've been hurt worse. This is just cosmetic. But he swayed slightly, and Emma realized he was more injured than he was admitting. Victor, Emma called toward the back room. I need to take Lorenzo to the hospital. Can you lock up? Hospital isn't necessary, Lorenzo protested, but Emma was already guiding him toward the door, one hand on his arm to steady him. You're bleeding and you can barely stand. We're going to the hospital. Victor appeared, took in the situation with one glance, and nodded. I'll drive you both. My car's closer than a cab. The emergency room was crowded with the usual Friday night chaos. Drunk college students, minor injuries, one man with a knife wound that made Emma's stomach turn. Lorenzo gave a false name, paid in cash, and endured the doctor's examination with stoic silence. 2 cracked ribs, a minor concussion, and the facial injuries that looked worse than they were. You should stay for observation, the doctor said, clearly skeptical of Lorenzo's claim that he'd fallen downstairs. Head injuries can be serious. I'll watch him, Emma heard herself say. Make sure he doesn't fall asleep for the next few hours. Monitor for concerning symptoms. The doctor looked between them. Emma in her work clothes, Lorenzo in his expensive suit now stained with blood, and clearly decided it wasn't worth arguing. He wrote prescriptions for pain medication and antibiotics, gave them a list of warning signs to watch for, and sent them on their way. In Victor's car, silence stretched uncomfortable between the three of them. Finally, Victor spoke. Emma, where should I drop you both? Your apartment or the penthouse? Lorenzo said quietly. I need to get some documents for my safe, and Emma shouldn't be alone tonight. Whoever sent her that threatening message knows where she lives. Emma wanted to argue, wanted to maintain the distance she'd fought so hard to establish. But the threat had been real, and she was scared in a way she hadn't allowed herself to feel in months. Being alone in Rachel's apartment, wondering if someone might try to use her against Lorenzo, felt more dangerous than spending a few hours in the penthouse she'd fled. Okay, she agreed. But just tonight, and you're sleeping on the couch. Lorenzo's mouth twitched in what might have been a smile. I live there. Technically, you'd be the one on the couch. Then I'll go to a hotel. Emma, please, just for tonight, let me know you're safe. Let me not wonder if someone's trying to hurt you to punish me. After that, you can go back to your life and I'll go back to mine and we'll pretend this never happened. The raw vulnerability in his voice undermined every wall Emma had built. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and let Victor drive them to the building that had once been her prison. The penthouse looked different, or maybe Emma was different enough that she saw it with new eyes. It was still opulent, still beautiful in the way unlimited wealth could buy, but it felt empty now. Lifeless. Despite the expensive art and designer furniture and the city view that people paid millions to own. When did you last eat? Emma asked, watching Lorenzo move gingerly toward the bedroom to change out of his ruined suit. I don't remember. This morning, maybe? You have a concussion and cracked ribs, and you haven't eaten all day. That's incredibly stupid, even for you. Emma moved toward the kitchen, muscle memory guiding her to cabinets she'd once organized. I'm making soup. Sit down before you fall down. She found ingredients for a simple chicken soup, the kind her grandmother used to make when Emma was sick. Cooking in Lorenzo's kitchen felt strange, familiar, and foreign at once, like stepping back into a life she'd left but could still navigate on autopilot. Lorenzo appeared 20 minutes later in soft clothes Emma had never seen him wear, sweatpants and an old t-shirt that made him look younger, more vulnerable than the tailored suits that were his armor. He sat at the kitchen counter, watching her cook with an expression she couldn't decipher. I missed this, he said quietly. Coming home and finding you here. The smell of food cooking, the sound of you moving through the space, making it feel lived in instead of just occupied. Don't. Emma stirred the soup more forcefully than necessary. Don't romanticize what we had. I was lonely every single day I lived here, cooking dinner for someone who never showed up, trying to make a home with someone who was never actually present. I know. You're right. It's hard being here now, seeing how empty it is without you, understanding what I lost. Lorenzo touched his ribs carefully, wincing. The business meeting today, when Sophia's cousin threw the first punch, you know what my first thought was? Not about strategy or retaliation or protecting my interests. It was about whether I'd see you again, whether I'd get the chance to finish what I started 6 months ago. Emma ladled soup into bowls, her hands shaking slightly. Which is what exactly? Winning me back? Proving you changed? Erasing the guilt of how you treated me? All of that. None of that. I don't even know anymore. Lorenzo accepted the bowl she set in front of him, their fingers brushing briefly. I just know that trying to become someone worthy of you has made me more myself than 3 decades of being Lorenzo DeLuca Mafia boss. That probably doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense. You've been playing a role your whole life, your father's role, your family's expectations, the part the Empire needed you to fill, but you never figured out who Lorenzo actually is underneath all that. Emma sat across from him, her own soup cooling untouched. The question is whether the person underneath is someone I could actually build a life with, or if he's so buried under years of violence and control that he's not recoverable. They ate in silence for a while, the soup warming Emma from the inside even as anxiety kept her stomach tight. Finally, Lorenzo spoke again. I signed over controlling interest in 3 of my operations to lieutenants I trust. By the end of next month, I'll have reduced my active involvement in the Empire by 60%. I'm keeping enough presence to maintain stability, prevent power vacuums that would lead to violence, but most of the day-to-day control is transitioning to others. Emma looked up sharply. That's a huge risk. Your enemies could see it as weakness. They already do. Tonight proved that. But I'd rather be seen as weak and actually have a life worth living than maintain power I don't even enjoy anymore. Lorenzo met her eyes, and Emma saw determination there, fierce and unwavering. The foundation is launching officially in 2 months at the gala. After that, I'm focusing on expanding it, using the resources I built through violence to help the people that violence hurt. It's not redemption. I'm not naive enough to think I can erase what I've done, but it's something. It's better than who I was. And what about us? What happens when our 6 months ends? That's up to you. The divorce papers are filed, ready to finalize whenever you give the word. Or we could try something else. Not a marriage, not yet, maybe not ever, but a partnership. 2 independent people who choose to be in each other's lives because they want to be, not because of obligation or contracts or family arrangements. Lorenzo set down his spoon carefully. I'm not asking you to come back here to be my wife again, to step back into the role you left. I'm asking if you'd be willing to see where this goes if we both keep changing, keep growing, keep being honest about what we want and what we can actually offer each other. Emma felt tears threaten again, overwhelmed by the sincerity in his voice and the impossibility of what he was suggesting. I don't know if I trust this yet, if I trust you, or if I trust myself not to fall back into old patterns. Then don't decide tonight. Finish your soup, sleep in the guest room, and tomorrow go back to your life. Keep designing jewelry, prepare for Paris, build everything you've worked so hard to create. We still have 2 months left in our agreement. That's enough time to figure out if this transformation is real or if I'm just performing change convincingly enough to fool us both. Emma nodded, exhaustion finally catching up with her. They finished eating, and Lorenzo insisted on cleaning up despite his injuries, moving carefully around the kitchen while Emma watched. It was such a small thing, such a normal domestic gesture, but it meant something. Lorenzo DeLuca, who'd had staff to handle every mundane task, was washing dishes himself because it was the right thing to do. When the kitchen was clean, Emma retreated to the guest room, the one she'd once used as a studio before Lorenzo's work consumed all available space. It had been converted back into a bedroom, but she noticed her old art books were still on the shelves, her sketchbooks stacked neatly in the corner. Lorenzo had kept them, preserved them, like he was maintaining a museum to who she'd been before his world had swallowed her whole. She couldn't sleep. Despite exhaustion, despite the comfortable bed, and the safety of the penthouse's security, Emma's mind raced with questions and fears and possibilities. Around midnight, she heard movement in the hallway and found Lorenzo sitting in the living room, staring out at the city lights. "Can't sleep either?" she asked, and he turned to look at her. "Concussion. I'm supposed to stay awake anyway." He gestured to the space beside him on the couch. "Join me?" Emma hesitated, then sat down, maintaining careful distance between them. They sat in silence for a while, watching the city breathe and pulse with late-night energy. "I'm scared," Lorenzo said suddenly. "I've faced death, betrayal, violence that would break most people, and I've never been scared the way I am now. Because all those other things, I knew how to handle them. I knew the rules, the strategies, the way to survive. But this, trying to be someone different, trying to earn something I can't take by force, I have no idea what I'm doing. And the thought of failing, of proving that I'm incapable of real change, that terrifies me more than any enemy ever has." Emma turned to look at him, really look at him, and saw the truth written in his exhausted face. He wasn't performing. This vulnerability, this fear, this desperate attempt to transform himself, it was real, messy and imperfect and sometimes contradictory, but real. "I'm scared too," she admitted. "Scared of hoping you've changed and being wrong. Scared of walking away and wondering if I gave up on something real. Scared that even if you have transformed, I'm not sure I know how to trust it after 3 years of feeling invisible." Then we're both terrified. Maybe that means we're finally being honest with each other. Lorenzo shifted slightly, wincing at the pain in his ribs. "For what it's worth, Emma, you were never invisible to me. You were too visible, too bright, too much of everything I didn't know how to handle. So I tried to dim you down, contain you, fit you into a space I could manage. That's on me. That's my failure, not yours." Emma felt something shift inside her, some frozen place beginning to thaw despite her best efforts to stay protected. She reached out and took Lorenzo's hand, a simple gesture that felt monumental given everything between them. "I don't know what happens next," she said quietly. "I don't know if we can actually build something real or if we're just two broken people trying to fix each other. But I'm willing to find out. Not tonight, not by rushing back into anything. But maybe when the 6 months are up, we don't finalize the divorce immediately. Maybe we see if this fragile thing we're building can survive in the real world." Lorenzo's fingers tightened around hers, and when Emma looked at him, she saw tears tracking silently down his face. In all their years together, she'd never seen Lorenzo cry. She'd seen him angry, cold, calculating, occasionally tender, but never openly emotional like this. "Thank you," he whispered, "for not giving up on me completely. For being brave enough to keep the door open even when I've given you every reason to slam it shut." They sat like that for hours, hands linked, watching the city transform from night to dawn. Emma dozed against Lorenzo's shoulder eventually, exhaustion overcoming her defenses, and woke to find morning light streaming through the windows, and Lorenzo carefully extracting himself to avoid disturbing her. "I should go," Emma said, sitting up and immediately missing the warmth of his presence. "Rachel will be worried, and I have work this afternoon. I'll have Marco drive you." Lorenzo stood carefully, his injuries clearly painful despite his attempts to hide it. "And Emma, would you consider coming to the Foundation Gala? Not as my wife, not as my date, but as the designer who created something beautiful for a cause that matters. You deserve to see the impact of your work." Emma thought about it, testing the idea against her instincts. A month ago, she would have refused immediately, unwilling to step back into Lorenzo's world even peripherally. But something had shifted between them in the night, not back to what they'd been, but forward into something new and undefined. "I'll think about it," she said, and saw hope bloom across Lorenzo's face. Marco drove her back to Rachel's apartment, maintaining professional silence that Emma appreciated. Her friend was already at work, so Emma had the place to herself to process everything that had happened. The threatening message, Lorenzo's injuries, the conversation that had somehow moved them from estranged spouses to something more complicated and potentially more real. She spent the afternoon sketching designs for her Paris collection, channeling confused emotions into creative work. The pieces were evolving beyond simple narratives of escape into something more nuanced. The complexity of choosing to stay when leaving would be easier. The strength required to hope when cynicism would be safer. The courage of letting yourself be vulnerable with someone who'd hurt you before. By evening, she had rough concepts for all 5 pieces and a clearer sense of what she was trying to say through her art. Transformation wasn't about becoming completely different. It was about integrating who you'd been with, who you wanted to become, carrying the past forward while refusing to let it define your future. Her phone buzzed with a message from Lorenzo. "How are you feeling today?" Emma typed back, confused, hopeful, scared, all at the same time. "That makes two of us. Get some rest, Emma, and thank you for last night, for staying, for talking, for not giving up on the impossible." Emma set down her phone and looked at her sketches, seeing Lorenzo woven through every line despite her attempts at artistic objectivity. He was part of her story, whether she wanted him to be or not. The question was what story they'd write together moving forward, tragedy or transformation, ending or new beginning. 2 months until the gala. 2 months until their 6-month agreement concluded, and she'd have to decide whether to finalize the divorce or risk hoping that Lorenzo's changes were permanent. 2 months to figure out if she was brave enough to choose him again, knowing all the ways it could destroy her if she was wrong. Emma pulled on Lorenzo's sweater, the one she'd never returned, that still smelled faintly of him, and let herself cry. For what they'd lost, for what they might be building, for the terrifying possibility that love might actually be worth the risk of hoping it could be different this time. Outside her window, the city hummed with life, full of people making impossible choices and taking terrifying risks, and hoping that somehow, despite all evidence to the contrary, things could work out. Emma decided she was one of them now, not the woman who'd fled Lorenzo's penthouse broken and alone, but someone stronger, braver, willing to believe that even the most damaged things could be rebuilt into something beautiful. If she could transform herself, maybe Lorenzo could too. And maybe, together, they could create something neither of them had been capable of building alone. The final 2 months passed in a rush of creative intensity and careful emotional navigation. Emma finished her Paris collection in early May, 5 pieces that told a story more honest than anything she'd created before. The centerpiece was a necklace she'd titled Chrysalis, raw diamonds encased in geometric silver settings that could be worn closed like armor or open to reveal the stone's inner fire. It was wearable metaphor, and when Victor first saw it, his eyes had gone suspiciously bright. "This is museum-quality work, Emma. You found your voice." The Foundation Gala loomed in mid-June, exactly 6 months after Emma had walked out of Lorenzo's penthouse with divorce papers and a desperate need for freedom. She'd agreed to attend after seeing the final guest list, not just wealthy donors seeking tax deductions, but families who'd lost loved ones to violence, teenagers being offered scholarships, community leaders working to create alternatives to the criminal pipeline that had consumed Lorenzo's youth. The event had evolved beyond a publicity stunt into something that might actually matter. Emma had also agreed, in a moment of weakness or strength she still couldn't identify, to wear one of her own designs to the gala. Not the jewelry she'd created for the donors, but a piece from her Paris collection, a bracelet called Unbound, that featured interlinked chains of white gold and black diamonds, beautiful and strong, connected but free to move independently. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone, least of all Lorenzo, who'd simply texted back when she told him, "Perfect. Thank you for being there." They'd settled into a strange rhythm over those final weeks, coffee meetings every Thursday, brief phone calls about foundation business, occasional texts that had nothing to do with logistics, and everything to do with two people learning to be honest with each other. Lorenzo shared updates about transitioning out of his empire, the challenges of learning to delegate control, the unexpected satisfaction of building something legitimate. Emma shared her fears about Paris, her excitement about the international exhibition, her growing confidence as a designer. It felt like friendship, or the beginning of something deeper that neither of them wanted to name yet. 1 week before the gala, Emma received an unexpected visitor at the boutique. Sophia Marcelli walked in wearing understated elegance, her demeanor less aggressive than their last encounter. "I'm not here to threaten you," Sophia said before Emma could react. "I'm here to apologize." Emma set down the settings she'd been examining, studying Sophia carefully for signs of manipulation. "I'm listening. I underestimated you. I thought you were just another woman who'd fallen for Lorenzo's power, someone who'd crumble when faced with the reality of his world." Sophia's smile was rueful, self-aware. "But you did the opposite. You walked away, built something of your own, and somehow managed to accomplish what no one else ever has. You made Lorenzo De Luca want to change." "I didn't make him do anything. That's his choice." "True. But you were the catalyst. And I've watched him over these months, seen him actually follow through on transformation instead of just performing it. He's stepping back from operations, delegating power, building something legitimate with the foundation. That's not the Lorenzo I've known for 20 years. Emma crossed her arms, still wary. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to know that the threat I implied months ago, the political complications, the enemies who'd exploit his feelings for you, those are real, but they're manageable now. Lorenzo has restructured his empire in ways that make him less vulnerable to leverage. He's built alliances based on mutual interest rather than fear. He's becoming someone who can actually survive in both worlds, the one he's leaving and the one he's trying to build. Sophia paused, and Emma saw something like respect in her expression. He's doing it for you, but also for himself, and that's the only kind of change that ever lasts. I still don't understand why you're here. To tell you that if you choose him, if you decide 6 months of transformation is enough to risk your heart again, you won't be stepping back into the same dangerous situation you left. Lorenzo has made himself safer to love. Whether that's enough is up to you. Sophia left as elegantly as she'd arrived, leaving Emma standing in the boutique's afternoon light, processing this unexpected validation. If even Sophia, who had every reason to want Emma gone, believed Lorenzo's changes were real, maybe Emma's hope wasn't entirely foolish. That evening, she met Lorenzo for their Thursday coffee, studying him with new eyes. He looked different from the man she'd married, still powerful, still commanding attention when he entered a room, but there was something softer around the edges now. He smiled more easily, listened more carefully, carried himself with the confidence of someone who knew his worth beyond the empire he controlled. "What?" he asked, catching her staring. "I'm trying to figure out if you're really different, or if I'm just seeing what I want to see." Lorenzo considered this seriously, not dismissing her concern. "I'm really different in some ways. I've delegated 70% of my operations now. I meet weekly with the foundation staff instead of my lieutenants. I'm learning to ask for help instead of demanding compliance. But I'm also still the same in other ways. I still think strategically, still assess threats, still have instincts toward control that I have to actively fight against. The difference is, I'm aware of it now. I catch myself before I fall into old patterns." Sophia came to see me today. Lorenzo's expression tightened. What did she want? To tell me you've changed. To tell me it's safe to choose you again, if that's what I want. Emma stirred her coffee absently. It was strange getting relationship advice from your former lover. Sophia and I were never really lovers. We were two people using each other for strategic advantage who occasionally slept together. It wasn't love. I didn't understand what love actually meant until I met you. Lorenzo reached across the table, stopping just short of touching her hand. And I still don't fully understand it, but I'm learning. Love means choosing someone's happiness even when it costs you what you want. It means supporting their dreams even when those dreams take them away from you. It means becoming someone worthy of their time rather than demanding they accept you as you are. Emma felt her breath catch. When did you figure that out? The night you left. The night I found your letter in the trash and realized I'd spent 3 years making you smaller so I could feel bigger. That's not love. That's possession, control, the same skills I used to manage my empire applied to someone who deserved so much better. I'm going to Paris, Emma said abruptly, testing him. After the gala, I'll have 2 weeks to prepare, and then I'm flying to France for the exhibition. I'll be gone for at least a month, maybe longer if the opportunities there lead to other things. Lorenzo's face went through a complicated series of emotions: disappointment, pride, fear, acceptance. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady. That's incredible. Paris is going to recognize what I've known for months. You're a world-class artist, Emma. I'm proud of you. You're not going to ask me to stay? To delay the trip? To consider how it might affect us? 6 months ago, I would have. I would have found reasons why it wasn't safe, why you should wait, why my needs should take precedence over your opportunities. Lorenzo finally closed the distance, his hand covering hers on the table. But I'm trying to be different, remember? Your dreams don't have to accommodate my fear of losing you. They get to be fully yours, pursued without compromise. Emma turned her hand over, lacing her fingers through his. The contact sent electricity through her. 3 years of complicated history and 6 months of careful rebuilding condensing into this moment of simple connection. What happens to us when I'm in Paris? She asked quietly. Whatever you want to happen. We can put everything on hold while you focus on your career. We can try long distance, video calls and texts, and missing each other across an ocean. We can finalize the divorce and start completely fresh when you get back. You decide, Emma. I'm just grateful you're considering any option that includes me in your future. Emma wanted to kiss him. The desire was sudden and overwhelming. 6 months of denying how much she still wanted Lorenzo crashing through her careful defenses. But she held back, not ready to cross that line yet, not sure what it would mean if she did. Let's get through the gala first, she said, her voice shakier than she'd intended. Then we'll figure out Paris and divorces and whatever comes next. Lorenzo nodded, understanding in his dark eyes, and they finished their coffee talking about safer things. The final gala preparations, Emma's anxiety about the Paris exhibition, Victor's plans to expand the boutique into a full design studio. But underneath the surface conversation, Emma felt something building between them, potential energy waiting for the right moment to transform into something real. The night of the gala arrived with unseasonable warmth, the city draped in early summer heat that made everything feel languid and full of possibility. Emma dressed carefully in her apartment. She'd finally moved out of Rachel's place into a small studio she could afford on her salary and commission earnings, choosing a simple black dress that would let her unbound bracelet be the focal point. Rachel helped with her makeup, practical nurse's hands surprisingly skilled with eyeshadow and liner. You look beautiful, Rachel said, stepping back to admire her work. And terrified, which is appropriate given you're about to spend an evening in Lorenzo's world again. It's not his world anymore. Not entirely. The foundation is something different. But Emma's hands shook as she fastened the bracelet, the weight of black diamonds familiar and grounding against her wrist. Just remember, you're not the same woman who left that penthouse 6 months ago. You've built something real, Emma. Whatever happens tonight, that doesn't change. Emma arrived at the gala venue, a historic hotel ballroom that had been transformed into elegant simplicity rather than the ostentatious displays usually favored by Lorenzo's world. Tables were set with centerpieces featuring the jewelry she and Victor had created, each piece catching candlelight and telling its story of transformation. The guest list was exactly as promised. A mixture of wealthy donors, community activists, families receiving foundation support, and carefully selected members of Lorenzo's organization who were transitioning toward legitimate operations. Lorenzo stood near the entrance greeting guests, and Emma's breath caught when she saw him. He wore a perfectly tailored tuxedo, but it was his expression that stopped her. Genuine warmth as he spoke with a teenage scholarship recipient, careful attention as he listened to a mother whose son had been killed in crossfire, quiet pride as he welcomed donors who were funding new programs. This was the man she'd glimpsed at the jewelry boutique 6 months ago, the one who noticed grieving children and wanted to create something better. Their eyes met across the ballroom and Lorenzo's entire face transformed. He excused himself from the conversation he was having and moved toward Emma with focused intensity, though he stopped a respectful distance away. You came. I wasn't sure you would. I promised I'd be here. I keep my promises. Emma gestured to the room. It's beautiful, Lorenzo. You did this, created something that actually matters. We did this. Your designs are the heart of it, the physical reminder of what transformation looks like. His gaze dropped to her wrist, and she saw emotion flash across his face when he recognized the bracelet. You're wearing one of your Paris pieces. It felt appropriate. Connected but free. Beautiful but strong. It's what I've been working toward. Lorenzo looked like he wanted to say something more, but Victor appeared with a couple interested in commissioning custom work, and Emma was pulled into conversation about her design philosophy and artistic process. The evening unfolded in a blur of introductions and champagne, speeches about the Foundation's mission, and a video presentation showing families whose lives had been changed by the programs being funded. Emma found herself seated at Lorenzo's table for dinner, not beside him but close enough to observe him throughout the meal. He was completely present, engaged with every guest, asking thoughtful questions and listening to answers with genuine interest. This wasn't performance. It was who he'd become when he stopped trying to control everything and started actually connecting with people. During dessert, Lorenzo stood to give a speech. Emma had helped him prepare it over their Thursday coffee meetings, but hearing him deliver it made the words more powerful. 6 months ago, I started this foundation for the wrong reasons. I thought it would be good publicity, a way to rehabilitate my reputation, a strategic move that might help with certain business transitions. But something unexpected happened. I met the families we're trying to help, heard their stories, understood the real cost of the violence I'd helped perpetuate. And I realized I had a choice. I could keep building power that ultimately meant nothing, or I could use the resources I'd accumulated to create something that might actually matter. He paused, and Emma saw his eyes find her across the table. Someone once told me that transformation isn't about becoming completely different. It's about integrating who you've been with, who you want to become. I've been a lot of things in my life, most of them not particularly admirable, but I'm trying to become someone who uses strength to protect rather than control, who builds up rather than tears down, who creates opportunities instead of exploiting vulnerabilities. This foundation is part of that journey, and I'm grateful to everyone here who's chosen to support it. The applause was genuine, emotional even, and Emma felt tears threaten. Lorenzo had found his way to authenticity, to purpose beyond power. Whether that was enough to rebuild their relationship remained to be seen, but it was enough to make her hope. After dinner, as guests mingled and examined the jewelry displays more closely, Lorenzo found Emma standing near the windows overlooking the city. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. "Somewhere private?" Emma nodded, letting him guide her to a small terrace off the main ballroom. The night air was warm, carrying the scent of summer flowers from the hotel's rooftop garden. They stood at the railing, the city sprawling beneath them like it had that night in the penthouse, but everything felt different now. "I have something for you," Lorenzo said, pulling a small box from his jacket pocket. "Before you panic, it's not an engagement ring or some grand gesture meant to pressure you. It's something else." He opened the box to reveal a key, simple, modern, clearly for an apartment or building. "What is this?" "The deed to your studio apartment is in your name as of this afternoon. I bought the building from the owner and transferred your unit to you, fully paid off, no strings attached." Lorenzo's voice was careful, watching her reaction. "You mentioned last week that your landlord was raising the rent, that you might have to move somewhere cheaper. I wanted you to have security, a place that's truly yours, that nobody can take away regardless of what happens between us." Emma stared at the key, emotions warring in her chest. "Lorenzo, this is too much. I can't accept." "Yes, you can, because it's not about us. It's about making sure you have the foundation to build your career without worrying about basic stability. You're going to Paris next month. You'll probably get offers to work with major fashion houses, maybe opportunities to teach or collaborate with other artists. Those decisions should be based on what you want, not on whether you can afford rent when you get back." He closed the box gently, pressing it into her hand. "Take it. Let me do this one thing that's purely about supporting your independence with no expectation of anything in return." Emma felt tears spill over, months of careful emotional control finally breaking. "Why are you doing this? Why are you making it so hard for me to stay angry at you?" "Because I love you. Not the way I thought I did when we got married, when love meant possession and control. I love you the way I should have from the beginning, wanting your happiness even when it doesn't include me, supporting your dreams even when they take you away, becoming someone worthy of your time rather than demanding you accept me as I am." Lorenzo's voice cracked slightly. "And if that means I spend the rest of my life proving I've changed while you build an incredible career in Paris or New York or anywhere else you want to be, I'll do it. Because you deserve everything, Emma. You always did." Emma turned to him fully, studying his face in the dim light. She saw truth there, vulnerability, the man she'd fallen for at a gallery 3 years ago, finally emerging from behind the Mafia boss armor. And she made a decision that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. "I don't want to finalize the divorce." Lorenzo went very still. "What?" "I'm not saying we go back to how things were, that marriage was broken, built on wrong foundations. But I don't want to finalize it yet either. I want—" Emma struggled to find the right words. "I want to see what we can build if we're both choosing each other freely, without obligation or expectation. Maybe that means we eventually renew our vows as different people. Maybe it means we stay legally married but live separately while we figure out what our relationship actually is. I don't know yet, but I know I'm not ready to close the door completely." "Emma." Her name came out like a prayer, desperate and grateful. "Are you sure? Because I don't want you to feel pressured or—" She kissed him. After 6 months of careful distance, Emma closed the space between them and kissed Lorenzo with all the confusion and hope and terrified longing she'd been holding back. He froze for a heartbeat, Then his arms came around her carefully, like she was something precious that might break if held too tightly. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lorenzo pressed his forehead against hers. "I've missed you so much. Every single day I've missed you. I missed you too. That's what made it so hard. Missing someone who hurt me, wanting someone who'd made me feel invisible, hoping someone could change when all evidence suggested people don't." Emma pulled back slightly to look at him. "But you did change, Lorenzo. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough that I can see who you're becoming. And I want to be part of that journey, if you'll let me." "If I'll let you?" "Emma, you're the only reason I started this journey. You're the reason I want to be better." Lorenzo cupped her face gently. "What happens now?" "Now I go to Paris in 3 weeks for the exhibition. You stay here and keep building the foundation. Keep transitioning out of your empire. Keep becoming someone who can live in both worlds without letting the violent one consume you. We video call, we miss each other, we figure out what our relationship looks like when we're both independent people choosing each other rather than roles we think we're supposed to play. And when you come back? We'll see. Maybe I'll move into the penthouse again, but as an equal partner with my own career and my own life. Maybe we'll get separate apartments in the same building and date like normal people. Maybe we'll discover we work better as friends and collaborators than romantic partners. I don't know, and I think that's okay. We have time to figure it out." Lorenzo kissed her again, slower this time, full of promise rather than desperation. When they finally returned to the ballroom, guests were beginning to leave, the evening winding down in satisfied exhaustion. Victor caught Emma's eye across the room and gave her a subtle thumbs up, clearly having noticed the change in her demeanor. Sophia Marcelli approached as Emma was collecting her wrap, her expression unreadable. "You chose him." "I chose the possibility of him. There's a difference." Emma met Sophia's eyes steadily. "He's still becoming whoever he's going to be. I'm just choosing to be part of that process instead of watching from the sidelines." "Fair enough. For what it's worth, I think you're good for him. You make him want to be better instead of just more powerful. That's rare in our world." Sophia extended her hand. "No hard feelings?" Emma shook it, recognizing the gesture for what it was. Acknowledgement that Lorenzo had made his choice, and Sophia was stepping back. "No hard feelings." The next few weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Emma finalized her Paris collection, coordinated shipping logistics for the exhibition, and spent as much time as possible with Lorenzo, learning the contours of their new relationship. They went to museums together, cooked dinner in the penthouse, while Emma taught him recipes her grandmother had passed down, stayed up late talking about childhood dreams and adult regrets, and the strange path that had brought them to this moment. It felt like dating, or what Emma imagined dating should feel like, two people discovering each other without the weight of obligation or performance. Lorenzo was surprisingly funny when he wasn't trying to project power, thoughtful about art and literature in ways he'd hidden behind his Mafia boss persona, vulnerable about the challenges of letting go of control while maintaining enough presence to prevent violence in the vacuum he was creating. "I'm scared," he admitted one night as they lay on the penthouse floor watching the city lights through the windows. "What if I can't sustain this transformation? What if the old patterns pull me back?" "Then we'll figure it out together. Change isn't linear, remember? You're going to have setbacks and moments where the old Lorenzo surfaces. The difference is you're aware of it now, and you have people, me, Marco, the foundation staff, who can help pull you back when you start sliding." Emma turned to face him. "You're not doing this alone anymore. That's what partnership means." The day she left for Paris, Lorenzo drove her to the airport himself rather than sending a car. They stood at the security checkpoint, neither wanting to say goodbye. "Promise me you'll call when you land?" Lorenzo's hand was still linked with hers, reluctant to let go. "I promise. And you promise me you'll keep building the foundation, keep stepping back from the violent operations, keep becoming someone who can live in daylight instead of shadows?" "I promise." He pulled her close, kissing her like he was memorizing the feeling. "Go create something beautiful, Emma. Show Paris what I've known for months. You're extraordinary." Emma walked through security with tears streaming down her face, turning back one last time to see Lorenzo watching her go, his expression full of love and loss and pride. This was what it meant to choose each other freely, supporting dreams even when they hurt, trusting transformation even when it was uncertain, believing that love could be different the second time if both people were brave enough to change. Paris was everything Emma had dreamed and more. The exhibition opened to critical acclaim, her unbound collection praised for its emotional honesty and technical skill. She received offers from 3 major fashion houses to create jewelry lines, an invitation to teach at a prestigious design school, and inquiries from collectors willing to pay staggering sums for her original pieces. But the highlight came 3 weeks into her stay, when Lorenzo appeared at her hotel unannounced, holding a bouquet of flowers and wearing an expression of nervous determination. "What are you doing here?" Emma asked, shocked to see him standing in her doorway. "I couldn't stay away. I know I'm supposed to be giving you space to focus on your career, but I had to see you, had to tell you in person how proud I am." Lorenzo stepped into the room, setting down the flowers. "I've been following the coverage of your exhibition, the reviews, the photos of your pieces, the interviews where you talk about using jewelry to tell stories of transformation. Emma, you're changing the industry. You're making people understand that jewelry can be art, that personal adornment can carry meaning beyond status or wealth." "You flew across an ocean to tell me that?" "I flew across an ocean because I love you, and I needed you to know that your success matters to me as much as my own transformation. Maybe more." Lorenzo moved closer, and Emma saw exhaustion in his face, the kind that came from long flights and jet lag, and the desperate need to see someone. "Also, I have something to show you." He pulled out his phone, opening a news article. Emma read the headline with growing shock. "Mafia boss Lorenzo De Luca turns state's evidence, agrees to testify against former associates in exchange for immunity." What is this? "It's me finishing what I started. I met with federal prosecutors last week and agreed to provide evidence against the most violent operations in my former empire: human trafficking, drug distribution, contract killings. Everything I was trying to step away from, I'm now actively dismantling by cooperating with law enforcement." Lorenzo's voice was steady despite the magnitude of what he was saying. "It means I'm burning bridges I can never rebuild. It means certain people will consider me a traitor. It means I'm choosing a legitimate life permanently, no possibility of going back." Emma sank onto the bed, trying to process this. "Lorenzo, that's incredibly dangerous. You'll have enemies, people who want revenge. I'll have witness protection if I need it. I'll have security. But more importantly, I'll have a clean slate. No more shadows, no more violence, no more living in the gray areas between legal and criminal. I'll be able to build the foundation without people questioning where the funding comes from. I'll be able to stand beside you publicly without worrying that my reputation damages your career." He knelt in front of her, taking her hands. "I'm doing what you did 6 months ago, walking away from everything I knew to build something better. And I'm asking if you'll be part of what I build on the other side." Emma felt tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by the enormity of Lorenzo's decision. He was destroying his empire, risking his life, choosing transformation so complete there would be no possibility of return. For himself, yes, but also for the chance to be worthy of her. "This is insane. This is the most reckless, brave, terrifying thing you've ever done." Is that a yes? It's a yes to partnership, to building something real together, to seeing if we can create a relationship based on choice rather than obligation, on freedom rather than possession. Emma pulled him up beside her on the bed. "But it's also a yes to taking it slowly, to figuring out what our marriage means when we're both different people, to not rushing back into patterns just because we miss each other." "I'll take it. I'll take any version of us you're willing to offer." Lorenzo kissed her, and Emma tasted salt from both their tears, felt the trembling in his hands that suggested how much this moment cost him. They spent the next 3 days in Paris together, walking along the Seine, visiting museums, eating at small cafes where nobody knew Lorenzo De Luca's name or reputation. It was the honeymoon they'd never had, the chance to just be Emma and Lorenzo without the weight of his empire or her invisibility pressing down on them. On his last night before flying back to testify, they stood on Emma's hotel balcony, watching the Eiffel Tower sparkle with its hourly light show. "I used to think power was the only thing that mattered," Lorenzo said quietly. "Control, territory, the ability to shape the world through force of will. But standing here with you, knowing I burned down everything I built to have this moment, I understand now that I had it backward. Love is the real power, the courage to be vulnerable, to choose someone's happiness over your own control, to transform yourself because who you were isn't good enough for who they deserve. That's the strongest thing I've ever done." Emma leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence, the steady beat of his heart. We're going to have to figure out so many logistics. Where we'll live, how your testimony affects our safety, what our relationship looks like when you're rebuilding your entire life from scratch. We'll figure it out together. That's what partners do. Lorenzo turned her to face him, his expression serious in the dim light. Emma, when you come home from Paris, however long that takes, I want to start over. Not go back to our marriage, but build something new from the ground up. Date properly. Learn each other without performance or obligation. Create a relationship based on who we actually are, rather than who we thought we should be. What about the divorce papers? Still filed, still legal, ready to finalize if you ever decide that's what you want. But maybe instead of finalizing them, we eventually tear them up and write new vows. Ones that acknowledge we're both works in progress, that transformation is ongoing, that loving someone means supporting their evolution even when it's uncomfortable. He smiled, tentative and hopeful. What do you think? Emma kissed him by way of answer, pouring into it everything she couldn't quite articulate. Hope and fear and love, and the terrifying courage it took to choose someone after they'd hurt you. To believe transformation was possible when cynicism would be safer. To risk your heart on the promise that this time could be different. I think, she said when they finally broke apart, that sounds exactly right. Emma stayed in Paris for another 2 months, her success opening doors she'd never imagined. But she video called Lorenzo every day, watching him navigate testimony, establish himself as a legitimate businessman, build the foundation into something that genuinely changed lives. He was different in these calls, lighter, more himself, someone who laughed easily and talked about the future with excitement rather than strategic calculation. When she finally returned home in September, Lorenzo met her at the airport with flowers and a nervous smile. And they started over. Dating like they were strangers who'd just met, discovering each other without the weight of their complicated history pressing down. Some nights Emma stayed at her studio apartment, maintaining the independence she'd fought so hard to build. Other nights she stayed at the penthouse. But it felt different now, less like a cage and more like a home they were building together. Victor promoted Emma to co-owner of the boutique when her Paris success brought international clients requesting her designs. The foundation expanded into 3 new cities, Lorenzo's testimony helping dismantle operations that had destroyed countless lives. And slowly, carefully, 2 broken people who'd hurt each other learned how to love without possession, how to support without controlling, how to be partners instead of roles. On their 4th anniversary, 3 years of complicated marriage and 1 year of rebuilding, they stood in the same penthouse where Emma had once handed Lorenzo divorce papers, but everything was different now. I have something for you, Emma said, pulling out a small box. Inside was a ring she'd designed herself, interlocking bands of white gold and black diamonds that could move independently but created something more beautiful when aligned together. It's us, Lorenzo said softly, understanding immediately. Separate but stronger together. I thought maybe we could renew our vows. Not the ones from 3 years ago that were about obligation and family alliances. New ones, about choosing each other freely, supporting each other's transformation, being partners in building something neither of us could create alone. Lorenzo pulled out his own box, revealing a matching ring he'd commissioned. I was thinking the same thing. Great minds, apparently. They exchanged rings there in the penthouse. No witnesses except the city sprawling beneath them. No formal ceremony except the promises they made to each other. To keep changing, keep growing, keep choosing each other even when it was hard. To support dreams that might take them different directions, trusting they'd find their way back. To love without possession, to build without controlling, to be fully themselves while creating something beautiful together. I love you, Emma said, and meant it completely. Not the desperate love of someone trying to fix a broken marriage, but the clear-eyed love of someone who'd survived the breaking and rebuilt something stronger. I love you too, Lorenzo replied, and Emma heard in his voice the man he'd become, not the Mafia boss who'd controlled an empire through violence, but someone who'd learned that real power came from vulnerability, that true strength meant choosing love over control, that the most courageous thing he'd ever done was let Emma go so they could both become people worthy of choosing again. They kissed as the sun set over the city, 2 people who'd destroyed their first marriage to build something better from the ruins. It wasn't a fairy tale ending where everything was perfect. They still fought sometimes, still struggled with old patterns, still had moments where transformation felt impossible. But they'd learned that love wasn't about perfection. It was about choosing to stay when leaving would be easier, about supporting growth even when it was uncomfortable, about believing that people could change if they had the right reasons and the courage to try. Emma's jewelry collection became internationally renowned, her designs featured in museums and fashion shows across the world. Lorenzo's foundation grew into a multi-city organization that actually reduced violence in the communities it served, his transformation from mafia boss to legitimate philanthropist becoming a case study in redemption. And together, they built a life based on choice rather than obligation, on freedom rather than possession, on the revolutionary idea that love could be a partnership between equals instead of a power dynamic between controller and controlled. Years later, standing at another exhibition in another city, Emma wore the ring Lorenzo had given her and felt its weight as a reminder, not of ownership but of choice, not of possession but of partnership, not of who they'd been but of who they'd chosen to become together. She'd walked away from Lorenzo De Luca's empire, and in doing so, she'd given them both the chance to build something better, something real, something worth choosing every single day. That, Emma thought, as she watched Lorenzo across the gallery supporting her career with the same intensity he'd once reserved for building his empire, was the most beautiful transformation of all. Not becoming completely different people, but integrating who they'd been with who they wanted to be, carrying forward their complicated history while refusing to let it define their future. Two people who'd hurt each other learning to love better, choosing each other freely, building a life that honored both their independence and their connection. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And that was more than enough.